Welcome to History Teller YT, where the mysteries of the past come alive. Today, we journey deep into the heart of Mesoamerica to uncover the incredible story of the Maya civilization. A world of towering pyramids, brilliant astronomers, skilled mathematicians, fearless warriors, and a culture so advanced that even today it continues to amaze. From their awe-inspiring cities and intricate trade networks to the secrets hidden in their hieroglyphs. This is the story of a civilization that saw the heavens as a map, the earth as a gift, and life itself as a sacred rhythm. Over the next 2 hours, we'll explore 20 chapters of Maya history, divided into fascinating segments. The rise of city-states, their kings and priests, the art and architecture that touched the skies, daily life and traditions, warfare and diplomacy, scientific achievements, the mysterious collapse of the southern cities, and the enduring legacy that still thrives in the modern world. Stay with us because every moment reveals a civilization that was more than history. It was a window into human ingenuity, spirituality, and resilience. So, get comfortable, open your mind to the past, and let History Teller YT guide you through the epic saga of the Maya. Deep within the vast rainforests of Mesoamerica, where howler monkeys cry through emerald canopies and mist rolls across the ruins of forgotten temples, a powerful civilization once rose, the Maya. Long before the first stones of Rome were set or the pyramids of Giza had faded into history, the Maya were already carving out a world of their own, a world ruled not by kings alone, but by the stars, the gods, and the rhythm of time itself. The origins of the Maya stretch back more than 3,000 years, to around 2000 BCE. Scattered farming villages began to appear in the lowlands of what is now southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and western Honduras. At first, they were simple communities, growing maize, beans, and squash, but slowly, the rhythm of agriculture gave birth to something far greater: cities. The fertile soils and abundant rainfall of the tropics allowed people to stay in one place. They began to build, not just homes, but sacred centers, plazas, and pyramids that reached for the heavens. By 1000 BCE, the first great Maya centers such as Nakbi and El Mirador emerged. Here, leaders began to harness both faith and fear, claiming divine connection with gods of rain, maize, and death. Each temple they built wasn't just stone and mortar. It was a cosmic statement, aligning perfectly with the stars above. These early city-states became living calendars, physical embodiments of time, astronomy, and faith. The jungle that now hides their ruins was once alive with song, color, and ceremony. The air trembled with the sound of drums, conch shells, and chants rising into the smoke of burning incense. The Maya believed their world was balanced between heaven, earth, and the underworld, and that balance had to be maintained through blood, sacrifice, and devotion. The civilization that was born in the forests would one day touch the sky, and then, mysteriously, fade back into the green silence that first birthed it. As the centuries passed, the Maya world began to flourish like never before. Between 250 and 900 CE, known as the Classic Period, the Maya transformed from small kingdoms into a constellation of powerful city-states. Each city was an independent realm, ruled by divine kings and queens who claimed to be descendants of the gods. Cities such as Tikal, Calakmul, Palenque, Copan, and Caracol grew into centers of politics, trade, and religion, each vying for dominance in a complex web of alliances and rivalries. Unlike empires such as Rome or China, the Maya never united under a single ruler. Instead, they were like a living galaxy, each city shining with its own brilliance, yet constantly colliding with others in war and diplomacy. The kings of Tikal and Calakmul, for example, fought an epic rivalry that lasted centuries, filled with betrayals, assassinations, and shifting alliances that changed the fate of the entire Maya world. Every city was a masterpiece of architecture and mathematics. Towering pyramids rose high above the jungle canopy, designed with precision so that on certain days, like the solstices, shadows and light formed divine patterns across their stairways. Observatories tracked the movement of Venus, while scribes carved history into stone stelae using a complex system of hieroglyphs, one of the most advanced writing systems in the ancient world. Trade routes carried jade, obsidian, cacao, and exotic feathers across hundreds of miles. Artists created pottery and murals so detailed that even today, their colors whisper stories of gods and kings. To the Maya, art was not mere decoration. It was a bridge to the divine, a way to keep history alive for eternity. But beneath the beauty of their achievements lay the seeds of something darker, the endless hunger for power that would eventually tear their world apart. Of all their achievements, none were more astonishing than their understanding of time and the cosmos. To the Maya, time was not a straight line. It was a living cycle, constantly repeating, echoing through generations. They believed the gods had created and destroyed the world multiple times before, and that humanity existed in a fragile balance, waiting for the next cycle to end. Their calendar system was one of the most precise ever created in the ancient world. Using both the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar, and the Tsokin, a 260-day sacred cycle, they combined science and spirituality into a unified cosmic order. Every ceremony, war, and coronation was chosen based on these cycles, ensuring divine alignment. When the long count calendar ended one great cycle in 2012, modern minds panicked. But to the Maya, such an ending was not apocalypse, but renewal. The Maya were also astronomers of extraordinary skill. They tracked the motion of planets, the phases of the moon, and the eclipses of the sun with an accuracy that rivals modern instruments. In cities like Uxmal and Chichen Itza, observatories such as El Caracol were aligned with the movement of Venus, a planet they believed symbolized war and fate. For them, the heavens were not distant, they were mirrors of human life. The rise and fall of stars matched the rise and fall of kings. The universe itself was a story being told, and the Maya sought to understand every word of it. Yet, even as they mastered the sky, the ground beneath them began to tremble, as famine, drought, and war slowly set the stage for one of history's greatest mysteries, the fall of the Maya. By the 6th century CE, the Maya civilization stood at the height of its glory. Deep within the green jungles of the Yucatan Peninsula and the Guatemalan lowlands, mighty cities glimmered like jewels scattered across an emerald sea. Towering temples rose above the mist, their limestone faces gleaming in the sun. At their summits, priests burned incense to the gods while kings stood before their people, adorned in jade, feathers, and the blood of their own sacrifices. The Maya had mastered the art of civilization itself. Cities such as Tikal, Palenque, Copan, and Calakmul grew into architectural wonders, each a reflection of divine order. The Maya believed that every structure mirrored the cosmos. Their pyramids represented sacred mountains, linking the underworld below to the heavens above. Their plazas were designed to host ceremonies where the earthly and spiritual worlds met through dance, fire, and ritual bloodletting. The architecture was not random, it was cosmic engineering. Every temple, every stairway, every carving carried meaning that connected heaven and earth. The Maya city wasn't just a place to live, it was a living map of the universe. At its center stood the Temple Pyramid, the heart of both political power and spiritual energy. Around it stretched palaces, ball courts, observatories, and homes, all woven together through sacred geometry. When the wind moved through the stone corridors, it was said to carry the voices of the ancestors. Stone masons, mathematicians, and astronomers worked hand in hand. Together they built cities that told stories in silence, stories of gods, time, and kings who dared to speak with the divine. To walk through a Maya city during this golden age was to walk through a sacred book, carved not in paper but in living stone. Each carving, each glyph, whispered a tale of faith, power, and destiny. This was not merely architecture, it was eternity given form. In the world of the Maya, rulers were not just kings, they were the living bridge between humanity and the divine. Every coronation was a cosmic event, marking the moment when the blood of mortals mingled with the essence of gods. These rulers carried titles like Kuhulaja, the Holy Lord, believed to possess sacred power granted by the heavens themselves. Their duty was immense, to maintain harmony between the celestial and earthly realms through rituals, warfare, and sacrifice. Among the greatest of these kings was Kinich Jenab Pakal, known as Pakal the Great, who ruled the city of Palenque for nearly 70 years. His reign transformed Palenque into one of the most beautiful and intellectually advanced cities in the Maya world. The Temple of the Inscriptions, his burial monument, still stands as one of the most magnificent achievements in ancient architecture. Inside his tomb, archaeologists discovered a jade mask placed over his face, symbolizing eternal life and rebirth. Even today, the carvings on his sarcophagus lid spark debates about cosmic journeys and the soul's path beyond the stars. The Maya rulers did not simply govern, they performed. They staged grand ceremonies where drums thundered, torches blazed, and the scent of copal incense filled the air. Through ritual bloodletting, piercing their tongues or ears, they offered their life force to the gods, ensuring fertility, reign, and victory. The royal court was both a palace and a theater of divinity, where every act was meant to please beings that watched from above. But behind this divine image lay political cunning. Kings formed alliances through marriage, conquered neighbors to expand their influence, and commissioned monuments to record their victories. The more temples they built, the more their names echoed through time. To the Maya, memory itself was power, and to be forgotten was to die twice. The true brilliance of the Maya Golden Age lay not only in their temples and kings, but in their relentless pursuit of knowledge. They were mathematicians, astronomers, architects, and writers who sought to understand the very structure of the universe. They did not separate science from religion. To them, understanding the cosmos was an act of worship. Their number system was revolutionary. Using only 3 symbols, a dot, a bar, and a shell, they developed the concept of zero centuries before it appeared in Europe. This single idea allowed them to calculate vast cycles of time, to predict eclipses, and to align temples with astonishing precision. Their calendar wasn't just a tool, it was a sacred mechanism, binding human destiny to celestial motion. The Maya also developed one of the most complex writing systems ever created. Thousands of glyphs carved into stele, painted on pottery, and written in codices recorded everything from royal conquests to agricultural cycles and mythological stories. The Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Maya books, reveals their deep understanding of astronomy and mathematics. It includes accurate records of Venus's movement across the sky, knowledge used to time wars and rituals. Education and artistry flourished together. Scribes and artisans were highly respected, for they preserved the link between past and future. Every stroke of a glyph and every brush of paint was sacred, connecting mortal hands with divine thought. The Maya believed that to write was to breathe life into the world. Their cities, knowledge, and faith combined to form one of the most sophisticated civilizations on Earth. Yet even in this age of glory, shadows were growing. Overpopulation, resource strain, and endless wars between rival kings began to weaken the roots of their greatness. The forest that had nurtured them for centuries would soon turn against them, and the songs of the Golden Age would echo into silence. As the golden age of the Maya ripened, it also began to rot from within. Beneath the glitter of jade and gold, a shadow grew, the hunger for power. City fought against city, king against king, in wars that lasted generations. The jungle that once echoed with prayers to the gods now thundered with the cries of soldiers and the clash of obsidian blades. This was the age of endless conflict, when ambition consumed the divine harmony the Maya had built for centuries. Unlike the massive empires of Rome or Persia, the Maya world was a collection of independent city-states, each with its own ruler, army, and sacred destiny. At the center of this political storm stood two superpowers, Tikal in the north and Calakmul in the south. Their rivalry would shape the fate of the entire civilization. Both claimed divine legitimacy, both sought to dominate trade routes and neighboring kingdoms, and both used religion as a weapon of control. Maya warfare was not fought for land alone. It was spiritual. To capture a rival king or noble was to capture their divine essence. Blood spilled on the battlefield fed the gods, ensuring the continuation of life. Armies marched through the dense jungle wearing elaborate headdresses, their faces painted with the colors of death. Their weapons were simple but deadly: obsidian-tipped spears, atlatls, and wooden clubs edged with volcanic glass sharp enough to slice bone. Yet the wars were as much about prestige as survival. Victorious kings built monuments boasting of their triumphs, depicting bound prisoners and divine approval from the gods. These battles drained resources, shattered alliances, and spread fear across the Maya lands. Villages were burned, farmers taken as captives, and trade routes turned into battlegrounds. The sacred cities that once glittered with ceremony now reeked of blood and smoke. The gods who once blessed the Maya began to demand more. More blood, more sacrifices, more devotion. And as the kings competed for divine favor, they unknowingly pulled their civilization toward the brink of collapse. The heavens remained silent, and the stars that once guided them now seemed to watch in judgment. Tikal, the jewel of the northern jungles, had long been one of the greatest cities of the Maya world. Its tall pyramids pierced the clouds, its palaces sprawled across the rainforest, and its kings ruled through divine right. Yet even this mighty city was not untouchable. To the south, Calakmul, the Snake Kingdom, rose to challenge its supremacy. What began as a rivalry of trade soon turned into a war of ideology and vengeance. For centuries, these two titans clashed in a series of brutal conflicts known as the Maya Superwars. Calakmul, allied with dozens of smaller cities, surrounded Tikal like a tightening noose. The Snake Lords sent their armies through the jungle, capturing vassal states and cutting off trade routes. At one point in the 6th century, Tikal was defeated so thoroughly that its monuments fell silent for nearly a century, an eerie gap in the city's inscriptions known today as the hiatus. But Tikal would not die. In the late 7th century, under the leadership of Jasa Chan Kawil I, the city rose again. He rebuilt temples, revived alliances, and led his armies into a decisive victory against Calakmul around 695 CE. The victory was immortalized in stone carvings showing the defeated Snake Lords bound and humiliated. It was a triumph that restored Tikal's glory, but it came at a cost. The cycle of vengeance never ended. The wars between Maya kings bled their people dry, consuming the very lifeblood of their civilization. The endless fighting destabilized the fragile balance of the Maya world. Resources once used for building and trade were diverted to war. Farmers were drafted into armies, crops went untended, and famine spread through the countryside. Cities that had thrived on cooperation now turned inward, paranoid and exhausted. Even in victory, the Maya kings were losing something greater, the unity that once made their civilization shine. The gods had been fed, but the people were starving. The kings had carved their names into stone, but the roots beneath their cities had begun to crumble. And in the silence that followed the wars, the jungle began to whisper, reclaiming what was once hers. To understand the Maya, one must understand their relationship with sacrifice. To them, life was a sacred loan from the gods, and blood was the price of its renewal. Every heartbeat was a prayer, every drop of blood a bridge between the mortal and divine. As their wars grew fiercer, so too did their devotion to sacrifice, for they believed that only through pain and offering could the balance of the universe be restored. In great cities like Copan and Yaxchilan, rulers stood atop towering pyramids, drawing blood from their tongues and earlobes with obsidian blades. The blood, caught on strips of bark paper, was burned as an offering, the smoke believed to carry their essence to the heavens. Queens often joined in these rituals, embodying goddesses of fertility and creation. The ceremonies were mesmerizing and terrifying. The flicker of torches, the sound of drums, and the slow rise of sacred smoke blending with the cries of the people below. But sacrifice was not limited to rulers. Prisoners of war were often chosen for ritual execution, especially captured nobles or rival kings. They were paraded before the people, adorned in feathers and jewels, then sacrificed to ensure reign, victory, or cosmic renewal. The Maya ball game, too, carried deep ritual meaning. It wasn't merely sport, it was a symbolic reenactment of creation itself. The losing team, or sometimes the winners, depending on the ceremony, might be offered as a gift to the gods. The Maya believed that without sacrifice, the sun would cease to rise, the rains would fail, and the world would plunge into chaos. Their devotion was both their greatest strength and their most tragic flaw. As their cities fought, and their gods demanded more, the blood of kings and commoners alike soaked the soil. Yet even as their civilization trembled under its own weight, the Maya never abandoned their faith. In their hearts, they believed the cycles of time would renew, that even destruction was part of creation. But as drought began to grip the land and the stars foretold troubling omens, the Maya were about to face the greatest test in their history. One not of war or kings, but of survival itself. For centuries, the Maya had lived in harmony with the rainforest, feeding on its bounty, worshipping its spirits, and shaping their cities to its rhythm. But the balance they cherished began to falter. The skies, once generous with rain, grew silent. The rivers that had fed the maize fields began to shrink. The songs of the frogs vanished from the night, and the once lush canopy turned brittle beneath the sun. Nature, it seemed, had turned against her children. By the 8th century CE, signs of environmental strain were everywhere. The dense forests around major cities had been cut down for timber, construction, and fuel. Fields that once yielded abundant maize had become dry and infertile. Archaeologists have found layers of limestone dust in ancient reservoirs, silent evidence that the once green hills were turning to stone. The Maya, who depended on rain-fed agriculture, faced a creeping terror: drought. The Maya world had no great rivers like the Nile or the Tigris. They relied instead on cenotes, natural sinkholes filled with groundwater, and reservoirs carefully engineered to store rain. But as rainfall declined, even these lifelines began to fail. The gods of rain, especially Chak, were worshipped with desperate devotion. Ceremonies grew larger, sacrifices more frequent. In times of crisis, the priests turned to the sacred cenotes themselves, offering jade, pottery, and even human lives to the depths of the earth, pleading for water. The droughts did not come all at once. They arrived in waves, years of dry skies followed by brief reprieves. Each wave struck harder, drying rivers, destroying crops, and spreading hunger. Famine stalked the jungles like an invisible predator. Families abandoned their homes, seeking food in distant cities. Some scholars believe this environmental collapse triggered massive migrations, forcing people into conflicts over resources. The Maya believed everything in nature was alive. The trees, the rain, the stones, even the wind. When these spirits grew silent, it meant the world's balance was breaking. The priests looked to the heavens, reading the stars for answers. But the stars gave no comfort. The prophecies began to speak of endings, of cycles that would close in fire and silence. The gods they feared were abandoning them. As drought and famine deepened, the once mighty cities of the classic Maya began to unravel. Their pyramids still stood tall against the burning sky, but the life that had filled them was fading. The plazas where kings had once been crowned grew silent. Markets emptied. Temples filled not with music and incense, but with dust and the echo of forgotten prayers. The Golden Age had become a memory, and the stone cities were turning into tombs. The breakdown began slowly, almost invisibly. Trade routes that had once carried obsidian, jade, and cacao across the land fell into disuse. The scribes who recorded royal triumphs stopped carving stele. Inscriptions end abruptly, as if the pen itself had fallen silent. Some cities tried to hold on through sheer ritual, building temples, performing sacrifices, and claiming that the gods still favored them. But the people knew the truth. The rains had not come, and the gods had turned away. Cities like Copen, once home to tens of thousands, began to depopulate. Archaeologists found evidence of malnutrition in the bones of its final generations. In Tikal, the monumental temples stood proud, but behind the walls, famine and disease spread. Farmers could no longer sustain the growing population. The ruling class demanded more tribute, more labor, and more blood. But their power was crumbling like the walls they once ruled from. The jungle, ever patient, began its slow revenge. Roots crept between the stones, cracking temples open. Vines crawled over carvings, swallowing the names of kings. Birds and insects returned to places once filled with the sound of drums and chanting. What had taken centuries to build was being reclaimed in silence. Yet even as cities fell, the Maya people did not vanish. Some fled north to the Yucatan Peninsula, where new centers like Chichen Itza and Uxmal began to rise. Others retreated into smaller communities, living off the land as they always had. Civilization was breaking apart, but the culture endured, scattered like seeds waiting for rain. The collapse was not one great event, but a slow, heartbreaking erosion. The gods had demanded too much, and the people had nothing left to give. The jungle closed its green arms around the ruins, hiding the memories of greatness from the eyes of time. The drought years did not only test the Maya's bodies, they tested their faith. For centuries, they had lived by a sacred covenant. If they honored the gods with blood and devotion, the gods would bless them in return. But now, as the sky burned and the earth cracked, that covenant seemed broken. The priests continued to offer sacrifices, chanting for rain, but the clouds did not come. The sacred fires dimmed. The gods, it seemed, had grown silent. In desperation, some cities turned inward, clinging to tradition. Others changed their rituals, perhaps even turning to new deities or new interpretations of the cosmos. But faith built on reciprocity cannot survive betrayal. When the gods stopped answering, the people began to question the very foundations of their world. Without divine order, kings lost legitimacy. Rebellions erupted in the hinterlands as farmers and laborers abandoned the temples that had drained their lives. The social fabric unraveled. Warfare, once a tool of prestige, became a matter of survival. Small kingdoms fought over food and water. Great dynasties like that of Tikal faded into legend. The power of the priesthood, once unshakable, dissolved. In some regions, sculptures show rulers no longer depicted as divine beings, but as weary mortals. The illusion of godhood had shattered, and yet, amid collapse, the Maya spirit endured. Their myths taught that time was cyclical, that every destruction was followed by renewal. In that belief lay their strength. Even as cities fell and jungles reclaimed the land, the survivors carried their gods, stories, and calendars into the future. They built smaller temples, continued their rituals, and taught their children the ancient ways. To the outside world, it would seem as though the Maya vanished. But they did not. They adapted. They became part of the jungle again, blending with the earth that had once betrayed them. And as centuries passed, the forest grew thick over their temples, hiding their brilliance beneath vines and moss. The world forgot them, but their stones remembered, waiting for the day when someone would listen again. The drought years had ended not with fire, but with silence, the quiet breath of a civilization that had given everything to the gods and received nothing in return. Out of the silence that followed the great collapse, new voices began to rise from the northern plains of the Yucatan. The classic cities of the southern lowlands lay in ruin, swallowed by vines and memories, but the Maya spirit had not died. It had only changed form. Around the 9th and 10th centuries CE, a new era dawned. The post-classic period, a time of adaptation, migration, and rebirth. From this rebirth emerged a new capital that would dominate the next age, Chichen Itza, the mouth of the well of the Itza. Unlike the jungle cities of Tikal or Copan, Chichen Itza was built on a drier landscape, surrounded by natural sinkholes called cenotes. These wells became both lifeline and portal to the divine. The city's founders understood water was power, and they harnessed it, politically, economically, and spiritually. Every drop that fell into the sacred cenote was an offering, a link between the mortal world and the gods below. But Chichen Itza's rise was not just a rebirth. It was an evolution. The world had changed, and the Maya had learned from their past. Where once city-states competed through endless wars, Chichen Itza became a center of unity, at least for a time. It blended traditions from across the peninsula and beyond, absorbing cultural influences from the Toltecs of central Mexico. From this fusion emerged a new vision of civilization, one both Maya and cosmopolitan. Travelers from distant lands brought new ideas, weapons, and gods. The great feathered serpent, Kukulkan, known to the Toltecs as Quetzalcoatl, became the city's divine symbol. His image, carved into the stones of temples and stairways, embodied both wisdom and renewal. Under his sign, Chichen Itza flourished into a vast metropolis of trade, science, and worship. The jungle may have reclaimed the old world, but in the sun-baked plains of the north, the Maya began again. The story of Chichen Itza was not merely one of survival. It was proof that even after disaster, the spirit of a people could rise stronger than before, carrying the memory of centuries like sacred fire into a new dawn. To walk through Chichen Itza during its height was to step into a living monument of human ingenuity. Its temples stood not as isolated structures, but as pieces of a grand cosmic design. At the city's heart rose the Temple of Kukulkan, also known as El Castillo, a pyramid so mathematically perfect that it functions as a celestial calendar carved in stone. Each of its 4 stairways has 91 steps. Together with the platform at the top, they total 365, the number of days in a solar year. Twice a year, during the equinoxes, the setting sun casts a miraculous shadow upon the pyramid's northern stairway. As daylight fades, a serpent of light appears to slither down the steps, connecting the heavens above to the sacred cenote below. For the Maya, this was no illusion. It was Kukulkan himself descending from the sky to bless the earth. Even today, Thousands gather to witness this ancient spectacle, proof of the Mayas' unrivaled mastery of astronomy and architecture. Surrounding the pyramid were other wonders. The Great Ball Court, the largest in Mesoamerica, where players reenacted the mythic struggle between life and death. The Temple of the Warriors, lined with columns depicting fierce, armed figures, and the Caracol, an observatory whose circular tower aligned with Venus and other celestial bodies. Chichen Itza was more than a city. It was a statement of cosmic order reborn. It was open, diverse, and international, attracting merchants, scholars, and pilgrims from across Mesoamerica. Obsidian from the highlands, turquoise from the north, cacao from the south, all flowed through its markets. The city's artisans created sculptures, murals, and jewelry of breathtaking sophistication. And yet, within this brilliance lingered shadows of the old world. Beneath the plazas and temples, the people still made offerings, gold, jade, and human lives, to the gods of rain and death. The sacred cenote, known as the Well of Sacrifice, received countless gifts and countless souls. The Maya had survived their apocalypse, but they still lived in a world where divinity demanded a price. Chichen Itza's greatness was built upon both knowledge and fear, a balance that would, in time, begin to falter. For more than 2 centuries, Chichen Itza stood as the beating heart of the post-classic world, a beacon of order in a land still haunted by collapse. Its influence stretched far across the Yucatan, uniting smaller towns through trade, religion, and shared ritual. But history is a circle, and even the brightest suns must set. By the 12th century, the city that once embodied rebirth began to fade into decline. The reasons, as always in Maya history, were many and intertwined. Power struggles erupted between rival lineages. The Itza elite, who ruled through the Temple of Kukulkan, faced growing opposition from other factions. Trade routes shifted, wealth dwindled, and neighboring cities like Mayapan rose to challenge Chichen Itza's dominance. The unity that had defined its golden years fractured, replaced once again by suspicion and ambition. Archaeological evidence suggests sudden disruptions, unfinished buildings, abandoned homes, and signs of violence. Some scholars believe civil war or invasion may have driven the people to flee. Others think the sacred wells ran dry once more, forcing migration northward. Whatever the cause, by the late 1200s, Chichen Itza was no longer the living capital it had been. Its plazas lay empty, its fires cold. But even in ruin, the city retained its power. Pilgrims continued to visit its temples for centuries, leaving offerings to Kukulkan. Legends grew around it. Tales of hidden treasures, sleeping gods, and a serpent who would one day return. For the Maya, Chichen Itza was not dead. It was dreaming, waiting for the cycle of time to turn once more. The fall of Chichen Itza marked the end of unity in the Yucatan, but not the end of Maya civilization. Across the peninsula, new centers rose: Mayapan, Uxmal, and others, each carrying forward the old traditions in new forms. The spirit of renewal that had given birth to Chichen Itza still pulsed through the land. As twilight fell on the great city, the jungle crept back once again. Vines wound around the carved serpent heads, birds nested in the temples, and the wind whispered through empty plazas. Yet, in the language of the Maya, endings are never final. They are merely the start of another turn of the wheel. Chichen Itza's story would sleep beneath the earth, waiting for the eyes of a new world to awaken it. After the decline of Chichen Itza, the Yucatan Peninsula entered a new and uncertain era. The once unified Maya world was fragmented once more, its great cities lying in shadow while smaller powers rose to fill the void. Among these, one city would come to dominate the north: Mayapan, the banner of the Maya. Built on the bones of the old world, It sought to restore the order and grandeur that had been lost. But like all rebirths in Maya history, its rise came at a cost. Founded around the 13th century, Mayapan was strategically located in the dry northern plains, near vital trade routes that connected the Caribbean to the Gulf of Mexico. It was both fortress and temple, surrounded by a massive defensive wall enclosing hundreds of structures. At its heart stood a smaller version of Chichen Itza's Temple of Kukulkan, symbolizing continuity with the past. The new rulers of Mayapan sought to link themselves with the sacred lineage of the old Itza kings, claiming that their city was the true heir to the divine order. But Mayapan was not just a religious center, it was political. The city established what some historians call the Maya League, a confederation of cities that pledged loyalty to Mayapan's leadership. Through diplomacy, marriage alliances, and sometimes war, the rulers of Mayapan extended their influence across much of the Yucatan. For nearly 2 centuries, it stood as the dominant power of the region, maintaining peace, or at least the appearance of it, through control and intimidation. Within its walls, life flourished. Markets buzzed with traders selling salt, honey, cotton, and obsidian. Priests performed rituals before crowded temples, and astronomers continued to track the stars, preserving knowledge passed down from Chichen Itza and Tikal. Artisans crafted pottery and jewelry that carried echoes of ancient styles yet bore the unique identity of this new era. But beneath the order, cracks were forming. The alliances that bound Mayapan together were fragile. The noble houses, especially the Kakam family who ruled the city, grew rich and arrogant. Their grip on power tightened while resentment festered among rival lineages. The memory of Chichen Itza's fall still haunted the Maya, but history, it seemed, was preparing to repeat itself once more. Power, in the Maya world, was always a dangerous inheritance. The kings of Mayapan ruled with divine authority, yet they were also prisoners of fear. To control so many rival cities required not only faith but force, and the Kakam dynasty wielded both with ruthless precision. Their city became a symbol of strength, but also of oppression. The Kakam family established a powerful aristocracy, surrounding themselves with soldiers, priests, and merchants who benefited from their rule. They demanded tribute from smaller cities, using both diplomacy and terror to maintain order. But their arrogance grew unbearable. They monopolized trade, excluded rival families from decision-making, and hoarded wealth within Mayapan's walls. What had begun as a symbol of unity became a kingdom of suspicion. Among those who resented the Kakam were the Shio, an influential noble family from the city of Uxmal. For years they tolerated Kakam rule, waiting for the moment when the balance would shift. That moment came in the mid-15th century. According to later chronicles, the Shio formed a secret alliance with other discontented groups and struck without warning. What followed was one of the bloodiest uprisings in Maya history. The conspirators stormed Mayapan, slaughtering the Kakam family almost to extinction. Only one, it is said, survived away on a trading mission. When he returned, he found his city burned, its temples desecrated, and its streets littered with the bodies of his kin. The League of Mayapan, the last organized Maya confederation, had fallen apart in flames and betrayal. The destruction of Mayapan around 1450 CE marked the final end of centralized Maya rule. The Yucatan splintered into dozens of small city-states, each ruled by competing lords. These polities, known as kukabals, constantly fought for dominance. The old unity of kings and priests had dissolved into a mosaic of rivalry. The age of empire was over. The age of survival had begun. Ironically, even as the Maya tore themselves apart, they continued to honor the same gods, build the same temples, and record time with the same calendars. The stars still shone above them, indifferent, eternal witnesses to human folly and fate. After Mayapan's fall, the Yucatan was a land divided. a chessboard of proud yet fragile kingdoms. Cities like Mani, Tulum, Izamal, and Koba became independent powers, each ruled by their own Batab chief. The rival families, especially the surviving Kakam and the triumphant Shio, continued their feud for generations. Despite the political chaos, Maya culture persisted with remarkable resilience. Their cities might have been smaller, their resources scarcer, but their identity, their art, faith, and knowledge remained unbroken. Temples were still built, though now modest in scale. The sacred ball game continued to be played, its echoes carrying through the tropical air as it had for millennia. Priests kept the sacred calendars, ensuring that rituals aligned with the heavens. In coastal towns like Tulum, perched dramatically on cliffs above the turquoise Caribbean, trade flourished anew. Sea routes connected the Yucatan with Central America and beyond, bringing salt, cacao, jade, and cotton. The Maya were weakened, yes, but never defeated. And yet, as they rebuilt their fractured world, a shadow loomed on the horizon, one they could not yet see. Across the ocean, far to the east, ships were being built in Spain. Men armed with steel, fire, and foreign gods were preparing to cross seas that no Maya had ever imagined. Their arrival would change everything. In the final years before contact, the Maya still looked to the sky, tracking the movement of Venus, the moon, and the constellations. Some of their priests spoke of omens, of stars that burned too brightly, of winds that carried strange scents, of prophecies warning that a new age was near. But to the Maya, time was eternal, a circle. They had seen destruction before. They believed they could survive it again. What they could not know was that the storm about to descend would not come from the heavens, but from the sea. The Spanish conquest was approaching, and with it, the final chapter of the ancient Maya kingdoms. The gods of blood and maize would soon meet the god of the cross, and the world the Maya had built over 3,000 years would be tested as never before. The last flame of the old world still burned, flickering defiantly against the coming darkness. The year was 1511. Far from the shores of Spain, in the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, a Spanish ship was wrecked on a reef near the coast of the Yucatan. Only a handful of survivors made it to land, among them two men whose fates would forever bind them to Maya history, Gonzalo Guerrero and Geronimo de Aguilar. Captured by local Maya warriors, they were brought deep into the jungle, into a world utterly unlike their own. Some of the survivors were sacrificed, their blood offered to the gods. Others were enslaved. But Guerrero and Aguilar would take very different paths. Aguilar clung to his Christian faith, praying daily for rescue. Guerrero, however, adapted. Over time, he learned the Maya language, earned his freedom, and even married a Maya woman, the daughter of a local chief. Covered in tattoos and ornaments, he became fully integrated into Maya society, a man reborn between two worlds. When Spanish conquistadors later arrived, they found Guerrero fighting against them, leading Maya warriors in defense of his adopted people. His story symbolized the collision and entanglement of two civilizations, one born of steel, the other of stars. By the 1510s, the Spanish Empire had already begun its brutal expansion through the Caribbean. They brought horses, guns, armor, and a hunger for gold and souls. The great Aztec Empire to the west would soon fall under the sword of Hernán Cortés. But before turning toward Mexico's heart, Cortés sent ships to explore the Yucatan coast. In 1517, Francisco Hernández de Córdoba became the first European to officially make contact with the Maya. What he found astonished him. Stone cities, paved roads, and organized societies. Not the primitive villages he had expected. But his astonishment turned to fear. The Maya, proud and unbowed, met his men with arrows and spears. Many Spaniards died before retreating to their ships. Word of these formidable people spread quickly through Spanish ranks. The Yucatan was no easy prize. It was a land of warriors and gods. Over the next few years, more expeditions followed. Juan de Grijalva, then Hernán Cortés himself. They mapped the coastlines, traded beads and mirrors for food, and took captives who could speak Maya to serve as translators. Every encounter revealed a new piece of the puzzle, a civilization as ancient and complex as any in the Old World. Yet behind the gestures of peace lay misunderstanding, greed, and destiny. To the Spaniards, the Maya were heathens to be converted. To the Maya, the pale men in metal skins were omens, perhaps messengers of the gods, or perhaps the gods themselves. The stage was set for a clash that would echo across centuries. By 1527, Spanish ambitions could no longer be restrained. Orders came from the governor of Cuba to conquer the Yucatan, and the man chosen to lead the campaign was Francisco de Montejo, known as El Adelantado. With soldiers, horses, and cannons, he sailed for the coast of the Maya homeland, dreaming of gold and glory. What he found instead was resistance unlike any he had ever faced. The Yucatan was a maze of dense forests, heat, disease, and hostility. The Maya fought not as a single empire but as countless independent city-states, each defending its territory with skill and ferocity. They knew the land, the paths, the hidden wells. They struck at night, ambushed convoys, and vanished into the jungle. The Spanish, used to defeating large centralized armies like the Aztecs, were bewildered by this invisible enemy. Every victory they claimed was temporary. Every captured city rose in rebellion as soon as they turned their backs. Montejo's campaign dragged on for years. He established settlements, first at Chichen Itza, then at Campeche, but each was abandoned after fierce uprisings. His son, Francisco de Montejo the Younger, continued the mission, pushing deeper into the peninsula. By 1542, after 15 years of brutal warfare, they finally founded the city of Merida atop the ruins of an ancient Maya center. The conquest, though incomplete, had begun to solidify, but the cost was staggering. Tens of thousands of Maya were killed, enslaved, or forced to labor under the encomienda system, where they toiled for Spanish landowners in exchange for protection and religious instruction. Temples were torn down to build churches. Idols were smashed in the name of the cross. The Spanish friars burned entire libraries of Maya codices, calling them works of the devil. What had taken millennia to write in stone and bark paper vanished in smoke within a generation. And yet, not all the Maya bowed. In the dense jungles and mountains, independent groups continued to fight, ambushing Spanish patrols, sabotaging supply lines, and preserving their rituals in secret. The war was not just for land, it was for the soul of a people. The Spanish carried their God upon the cross. The Maya carried theirs in their blood and memories. In that struggle, both worlds were forever changed. By the mid-16th century, the Spanish declared victory over the Yucatan, but in truth, the conquest was never complete. The Maya spirit refused to die. Cities may have fallen, but villages deep in the forest still whispered the old prayers. Beneath every church built by Spanish hands, the Maya buried offerings to their ancient gods, blending Christianity with their own beliefs. The invaders had won the war of swords, but the war of souls remained uncertain. Some of the last great Maya strongholds, like Nochpatan, the capital of the Itza kingdom in modern-day Guatemala, remained independent for nearly 2 centuries more. There, on an island in Lake Petan Itza, the Itza people continued their ancient traditions, ruled by kings who traced their lineage back to the gods. Spanish missionaries came and went, often killed or driven away. It was not until 1697, almost 200 years after the fall of Chichen Itza, that Spanish forces finally captured Nochpatan, the last independent Maya city. But even then, the Maya did not disappear. They adapted, blending their faith, language, and customs with those of their conquerors. Their resistance continued in quiet defiance. In songs, in secret ceremonies, in stories told by firelight. Even centuries later, during the caste war of Yucatan in the 19th century, Maya rebels rose again, reclaiming parts of their ancestral land for decades. The arrival of the Spaniards did not end Maya civilization. It transformed it. Beneath the surface of colonization, the old world still breathed. The Maya calendar continued to turn, marking time in sacred cycles that no empire could erase. The stars still guided their rituals. The maize still grew from the earth their ancestors had blessed with blood. The clash of worlds was brutal and tragic, but it was not the end. It was a transformation. Out of conquest rose survival. Out of fire came renewal. And today, across Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and Honduras, millions of Maya descendants still speak their languages, celebrate their gods, and honor the same sun and moon their ancestors once did. The Spaniards came with fire and faith, but the Maya endured with silence and time. History bent beneath the sword, yet the stars remained unchanged. When the smoke of conquest finally cleared, the Maya world was unrecognizable. The once great cities lay in ruins, their temples dismantled to build churches and colonial mansions. The old rulers were gone, replaced by Spanish governors, priests, and soldiers. Yet, beneath the dust and rubble, a quiet heartbeat remained, the pulse of an ancient civilization refusing to die. The Spaniards came not only for gold but for souls. They believed it was their divine duty to convert the Maya to Christianity. The friars, especially those of the Franciscan order, built missions across the Yucatan, Chiapas, and Guatemala. Their churches rose where pyramids once stood. Crosses replaced idols. The Spanish priests taught the Maya the Lord's Prayer, the Catechism, and the rituals of Mass. But in many villages, those lessons took on unexpected shapes. In secret, the Maya merged their old beliefs with the new faith. To them, Jesus became another divine figure, a god of sacrifice, not unlike their own. The Virgin Mary took on the traits of the earth goddess, the mother of maize and fertility. Saints became spirits of rain, harvest, and protection. Every holy day was tied to the turning of the seasons. Every candle burned in memory of both Christ and Kukulkan. To Spanish eyes, this seemed like conversion. To the Maya, it was survival. Life under Spanish rule was harsh. The encomienda system bound entire communities to labor for Spanish landowners under the guise of protection and religion. Fields that once grew maize for families now fed colonial estates. The Maya paid tribute in crops, cloth, and work, while Spanish officials enforced obedience with whips and prisons. Yet the Maya endured, preserving their traditions through whispers and symbols. In the markets, they still traded jade and obsidian, hidden beneath baskets of fruit and corn. In the forests, they still held ceremonies by moonlight, praying for rain and fertility. Even as their language was banned in official records, they taught it to their children in secret, keeping alive the sounds of their ancestors. The friars recorded much of what they saw, often with both awe and fear. One of them, Diego de Landa, famously chronicled Maya culture, and then, in a tragic contradiction, ordered their sacred texts burned in 1562. He wrote, "We found many books, and as they contained nothing in which were not superstitions and falsehoods of the devil, we burned them all. Hundreds of years of knowledge, astronomy, medicine, prophecy, vanished in flames that night. Yet the Maya, ever resilient, carried their wisdom in memory, song, and stone. They had seen cities fall before. They would outlast this empire, too. Though the Spanish claimed victory, true conquest proved impossible. The Maya did not rebel openly at first. Instead, they resisted through adaptation, cunning, and the preservation of culture. When swords and fire failed them, they turned to the power of words, stories, and the earth itself. In villages across the Yucatan and Guatemala, elders continued to teach children in Mayan languages: Kich, Yucatec, Mam, and dozens more. These words held the DNA of their ancestors. Terms for stars, maize, time, and spirits that had no translation in Spanish. The colonizers tried to suppress them, insisting on Castilian speech in courts and churches. But language is not easily chained. At home, in the fields, and in the forest, the Maya tongue thrived, passing knowledge that could not be erased by decree. The 16th and 17th centuries also saw the birth of something extraordinary: the preservation of Maya history through writing in the Latin alphabet. Though their hieroglyphs had been destroyed, Maya scribes adapted to the conqueror's script to protect their own memory. From this act of resistance came one of the most powerful texts of all time, the Popol Vuh, often called the Maya Bible. Written in Kich Maya by anonymous authors in the highlands of Guatemala, the Popol Vuh tells the story of creation, the birth of the gods, and the adventures of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Spelank, who descended into the underworld to defeat the lords of death. It is a tale of balance, sacrifice, and rebirth, the essence of Maya philosophy. That the text survived at all is a miracle. It was later translated by Spanish priests who could not help but marvel at its poetic depth. In addition to their mythology, the Maya also recorded new chronicles, the books of Chilam Balam, which blended history, prophecy, and reflection on colonial suffering. These texts described famine, oppression, and loss, yet also spoke of a future renewal. The Maya saw time as cyclical. Thus, no darkness could last forever. Through these writings, they reclaimed their voice. Even under Spanish eyes, they shaped their narrative, not as a defeated people, but as guardians of an eternal cycle. Every word written, every prayer whispered in the old tongue, was an act of rebellion wrapped in silence. For the Spanish crown, the Yucatan was a distant frontier. For the Maya, it was still sacred ground. The colonizers built their cities atop the bones of the old ones, but the earth beneath remained Maya, living, remembering, waiting. By the 17th and 18th centuries, the Spanish believed they had pacified the Maya lands. Towns paid tribute, priests preached sermons, and colonial officials ruled with an iron hand. Yet beneath the surface of obedience burned the slow fire of defiance. Across the Yucatan and Guatemala, secret brotherhoods formed, networks of Maya nobles, priests, and commoners who preserved ancient rites in hidden shrines deep within caves or jungles. These places, known as cenotes and chaltens, became temples of resistance. There, offerings of corn, flowers, and jade were made to the old gods, even as Spanish crosses hung above village altars. The two faiths intertwined like vines on stone, inseparable, yet forever at odds. Rebellions flared from time to time. Small uprisings broke out in the mountains, often led by shamans or prophets claiming visions from the gods. Some promised the return of the ancient kings. Others called for vengeance against the Spaniards. Most were crushed brutally, yet each left its mark, a reminder that conquest was never complete. The Spanish crown's obsession with control extended beyond religion. They imposed new taxes, forced labor, and demanded military service. In response, many Maya fled deeper into the forests, forming hidden communities far from colonial oversight. These groups maintained traditional dress, rituals, and governance, keeping alive a world the Spanish could not fully touch. Even within towns, subtle acts of rebellion persisted. Maya artisans carved Christian saints with Maya features. They painted murals where angels wore feathered headdresses, and Jesus stood on pyramids. What looked like devotion to the Spanish was In truth, cultural survival disguised as piety. By the late 1700s, centuries of suppression had not erased Maya identity. It had forged it anew. The people who once built empires of stone now carried their civilization within themselves, invisible yet indestructible. When outsiders looked upon them, they saw peasants and converts. But the Maya saw something else. The continuation of the sacred order, hidden beneath centuries of foreign rule. As the winds of independence began to sweep across Latin America in the 19th century, the Maya watched. Empires rose and fell around them, just as they always had. And though the cross still hung above their villages, their true gods remained in the soil, in the stars, and in their hearts. The colonizers had brought fire and faith, but the Maya still held time itself. The wheel of the calendar continued to turn, and with it, the promise that one day, the old world would rise again. By the middle of the 19th century, 3 centuries after the Spanish conquest, the Maya world was still bound by chains. Not of swords and crosses now, but of debt, land, and labor. The new rulers were not conquistadors but Creole elites, descendants of the Spanish who now governed independent Mexico. To the Maya peasants of the Yucatan, independence had changed nothing. The masters had new names, but the suffering remained the same. The hacienda system replaced the encomienda, but it was no less cruel. Vast estates stretched across the land, owned by wealthy landlords who forced Maya workers to toil in the heat for little or no pay. The once sacred maize fields were replaced by henequen, a plant used to make rope and textiles, called green gold, for its profitability. The Maya were forbidden from owning land, burdened with taxes they could never pay, and punished harshly if they tried to flee. But beneath the surface, old fires smoldered. The Maya still met secretly in jungles, performing rituals, consulting shamans, and praying to gods of vengeance and renewal. Among them rose charismatic leaders, men like Jacinto Pat, Cecilio Chi, and Manuel Antonio I, who dreamed of freeing their people from centuries of humiliation. In 1847, that dream turned to flame. When colonial authorities executed Manuel I for plotting rebellion, the Maya world erupted in fury. In the town of Tepic, Maya fighters led by Cecilio Chi massacred the local white and mestizo population, declaring war on their oppressors. Within weeks, villages across the peninsula joined the uprising. The caste war of Yucatan had begun, a rebellion that would shake Mexico and echo across the Americas. The Maya called it a war of liberation. The elites called it a racial revolt. In truth, it was both, a desperate struggle for dignity, land, and the right to exist. Armed with machetes, muskets, and centuries of anger, Maya rebels swept through the countryside, destroying plantations and freeing enslaved laborers. Towns fell one after another. By 1848, the rebels controlled almost the entire Yucatan Peninsula. Only the fortified city of Mérida and a few coastal enclaves remained in Creole hands. For a brief, electrifying moment, it seemed as if history was reversing, as if the Maya were reclaiming the land that had always been theirs. But the war was far from over. In the heart of the jungle, a strange and powerful vision was about to guide the next phase of their struggle, a vision that would blur the line between faith and resistance. As the rebellion raged on, the Maya turned increasingly to the power that had always sustained them, their gods. In the dense forests near Chan Santa Cruz, today's Felipe Carrillo Puerto, rebel leaders claimed to hear a divine voice speaking from a wooden cross. It was said that the cross itself gave commands, offered prophecies, and promised victory if the people stayed united and faithful. This sacred object became known as the Talking Cross, Cruz Parlante, and it transformed the rebellion from a war into a holy crusade. Priests of the new faith, called Cruzab, spread its message throughout the jungle. They preached that God favored the Maya and that one day, They would drive the foreigners from their land entirely. To the oppressed villagers, the talking cross became a beacon of hope, proof that the spirits of their ancestors still walked among them. A new capital was founded at Chan Santa Cruz, deep in the uncharted forest, protected by thick jungles and fierce loyalty. There, Maya leaders built temples around the cross and created a theocratic government, blending Catholic rituals with ancient traditions. Priests wore white robes, incense filled the air, and hymns were sung in the Maya language. Soldiers knelt before the cross before battle, believing its blessings made them invincible. The Mexican government and foreign observers were both astonished and terrified by this development. To them, the talking cross represented fanaticism. To the Maya, it was liberation made manifest. The Spanish had once brought the cross as a symbol of conquest. Now the Maya wielded it as a weapon of freedom. For decades, the rebels held out against superior forces. British traders from nearby Belize, sympathetic or simply opportunistic, supplied them with weapons in exchange for timber and trade rights. The rebels established their own borders, their own government, their own faith, effectively creating an independent Maya state in the jungles of Quintana Roo. But isolation, famine, and internal divisions began to erode their strength. The Creole armies, backed by Mexico and eventually the United States, launched brutal campaigns to reclaim the lost territories. Villages were burned, leaders executed, and entire communities displaced. Still, the talking cross remained. Even when bullets fell silent, its believers whispered prayers to it in secret, convinced that one day the prophecy of freedom would be fulfilled. The caste war was not just a rebellion. It was a spiritual resurrection of an entire civilization that had refused to vanish. The caste war lasted for more than half a century, one of the longest and bloodiest indigenous uprisings in world history. From 1847 well into the early 1900s, the Maya fought not only for land but for identity, dignity, and survival. Though the tide eventually turned against them, their endurance became legendary. By the 1850s, epidemics, hunger, and continuous fighting had weakened the rebels. The Mexican army, reinforced and better armed, retook key cities one by one. Yet, the deep jungles of the east remained unconquered. There, the independent Maya theocracy centered on the talking cross persisted, resisting assimilation for decades. Even as railways and telegraphs spread through Mexico, the Maya forests remained a realm apart, a world where the ancient gods still spoke. It was not until 1901, when Mexican troops captured Chan Santa Cruz, that the rebellion was officially declared over. But even that victory was hollow. Guerrilla warfare continued for years, and the spirit of revolt never died. The Maya might have lost the war on paper, but in their hearts and in their culture, they had reclaimed something far greater, the unbreakable memory of who they were. The aftermath of the war left scars across the Yucatan. Entire towns were depopulated, and tens of thousands were killed or displaced. Yet the Maya identity endured, evolving once again to survive. They continued to practice their faith, a fusion of Catholicism and ancient ritual, and to speak their languages, passing down oral histories that preserved the story of the caste war as both tragedy and triumph. To outsiders, it was a rebellion that failed. To the Maya, it was proof that their ancestor spirit could never be extinguished. The talking cross, once the voice of prophecy, became a symbol of unity, a reminder that the gods still watched, and that freedom was not a dream but a destiny delayed. Today, in villages across the Yucatan, the descendants of those rebels still tell the story. They speak of Cecilio Chi and Jacinto Pat not as lost warriors, but as heroes who dared to defy empires. They honor the talking cross with flowers and prayers, not as superstition, but as memory. The caste war was more than a rebellion. It was the echo of a civilization that refused to bow to history. The blood of the Maya had been spilled, But through that blood, their identity was reborn. The jungle that once hid their revolution now carries their whispers in the wind. And somewhere, beneath the roots of ceiba trees and the ruins of forgotten temples, the gods of the Maya still listen, patient, eternal, and waiting for the next turn of time's endless wheel. For centuries, Western historians told a simple story: that the Maya civilization disappeared. They pointed to the ruined temples swallowed by the jungle and declared that the great culture was gone. A tragic mystery. But this story was a lie born of ignorance. The truth is that the Maya never vanished. They survived. They adapted. And today, millions of Maya descendants still walk the same lands their ancestors once ruled. From the highlands of Guatemala to the lowlands of Yucatan, from Belize to Honduras, the modern Maya speak more than 30 living languages, each carrying echoes of an ancient tongue that once filled royal courts and temple plazas. Their faces, their traditions, their weaving, their prayers, all bear the mark of a civilization that refused to die. In the small villages of Chiapas, women still weave textiles patterned with symbols that mirror the glyphs carved on the walls of Palenque. In the forests of Petén, farmers bless the soil with corn and incense before planting, invoking the same maize gods who, according to the Popol Vuh, shaped humanity from dough. The heartbeat of Maya time, measured in the sacred 260-day Tzolk'in calendar, still guides births, marriages, and rituals. Yet, despite their endurance, modern Maya communities have faced relentless struggle. Centuries of colonialism and exploitation turned many into second-class citizens in their own lands. Their languages were often forbidden in schools, their beliefs mocked or dismissed as superstition. In Guatemala, during the brutal civil war of the late 20th century, thousands of Maya were targeted in genocidal campaigns, massacred simply for being indigenous. But as the 21st century dawned, something remarkable began to happen. Maya voices, long silenced, began to rise again. In politics, art, and education, indigenous teachers fought to include Maya history in schools. Filmmakers, poets, and scholars began telling their own stories. For the first time in centuries, the Maya were not just surviving, they were reclaiming the narrative of who they were. The ruins once seen as relics of a dead past became symbols of pride. Tourists might see stone pyramids. The Maya saw ancestral homes. Beneath every stone, they said, a memory still breathes. The old gods had not gone, they had simply waited. The Maya legacy is not just carved in stone. It is written in stars, numbers, and time itself. For generations, Western scholars dismissed their mathematics and astronomy as primitive. But when archaeologists and epigraphers began deciphering Maya glyphs in the 20th century, they uncovered something astonishing: a scientific system far ahead of its time. The Maya had invented the concept of zero independently, a mathematical breakthrough that Europe would not adopt for centuries. Their calendars were not only precise but elegantly interconnected. The Hab, a 365-day solar calendar, worked alongside the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred cycle. Together, they formed the calendar round, a 52-year pattern that defined life, destiny, and even politics. When these discoveries reached the modern world, they transformed how humanity saw the ancient Americas. The Maya were no longer seen as lost mystics but as intellectual equals of the Egyptians, Greeks, and Chinese. And for the descendants of the Maya, this recognition became a source of empowerment. Universities began offering courses in Maya epigraphy. Local schools started teaching glyph writing. Young Maya artists painted murals of gods like Kukulkan, not as ancient myths but as symbols of cultural pride. The so-called 2012 prophecy, a misinterpretation of the Maya long count calendar, also reignited global fascination. While many outsiders wrongly claimed it predicted the end of the world, Maya elders explained that 2012 was never about apocalypse. It marked the end of one era, Baktun, and the beginning of another, a spiritual renewal, a rebirth. For the modern Maya, it was a reminder that time is cyclical, that endings are simply beginnings in disguise. Today, in communities like San Juan Camula, Santiago Atitlan, and Coban, ancient knowledge and modern life intertwine. Smartphones share space with incense and candles. Maya priests bless both crops and computers. Astronomers and elders alike gather to observe solstices at ancient temples, using calculations their ancestors perfected thousands of years ago. It is not nostalgia. It is continuity. The same cosmic rhythm that guided the builders of Tikal still beats in the hearts of their descendants. The Maya do not live in history, they live with it. Every civilization rises and falls, but few ever find their voice again after silence. The Maya did, and that is perhaps their greatest miracle. In the past century, Maya identity has undergone a quiet but powerful renaissance. Across Mexico, Belize, and Central America, Maya people are now professors, politicians, filmmakers, and activists, reclaiming space in societies that once erased them. In Guatemala, Rigoberta Menchú, a Kitsch Maya woman, became a global symbol of indigenous rights, winning the Nobel Peace Prize in 1992 for her fight against oppression. Her story inspired countless others to speak openly of the pain and pride of being Maya. In Belize, Maya communities secured legal recognition of their ancestral lands, a victory that echoed across indigenous movements worldwide. In Mexico, bilingual education programs now teach both Spanish and Maya languages. Radio stations broadcast in Caxxical, Quechua, and Yucatec. Festivals once suppressed by colonial laws are celebrated again with music, dance, and prayer. The temples that once lay silent now resonate with chants once more. At Chichen Itza, Maya elders perform the new fire ceremony during the solstice, lighting torches to welcome the sun. Tourists watch in awe, but for the Maya, it is not a show. It is a continuation. The gods are still listening. The ancestors are still near. This revival is not just cultural, it is political. The Maya have learned to use modern tools to defend ancient rights. Activists organize online, preserving languages through digital archives. Filmmakers document oral traditions that were once nearly lost. The Maya youth no longer see themselves as shadows of a vanished empire, but as the living heart of one that endures. When you walk through a Maya village today, you might hear laughter beside stone ruins. Children play soccer near the foot of temples their ancestors built. Women weave cosmic patterns into cloth that tell stories of stars and gods. Every thread, every song, every prayer, they all say the same thing. We are still here. The Maya story began thousands of years ago in the jungles of Petén. It endured conquest, rebellion, and silence. And now, in the 21st century, it rises again, a civilization reborn not in stone, but in spirit. For the Maya, time has no end, only return. The gods have not abandoned them. The stars still move in sacred rhythm. The people who built pyramids to touch the heavens still walk the earth, whispering to the wind, "We were never lost. You just stopped listening." The Maya had a language unlike any other in the ancient world. Not just words spoken or written, but a code carved into stone, bark, and ceramics, designed to speak across centuries. Their hieroglyphic script, discovered in fragments by archaeologists, was a combination of logograms and syllabic symbols. Each glyph carried multiple layers of meaning. Some recorded the reign of kings, others the cycles of the stars, while many encoded sacred myths that linked the earthly world to the divine. Maya scribes, called Atizib, were trained from childhood to master this intricate system. To them, each glyph was sacred, a a thread connecting mortals to gods. A single monument could contain thousands of symbols, narrating history, astronomy, and prophecy in one continuous story. The writing adorned temple walls, altars, stelae, and codices, but only the elite were trained to read it. These symbols were a language of power. Knowledge meant authority. The Popol Vuh, one of the most famous surviving Maya texts, was originally preserved through oral tradition before being transcribed using Latin letters. But before its transcription, entire libraries of codices existed, each one detailing astronomical calculations, agricultural cycles, ritual ceremonies, and genealogies of kings. These books were made from bark paper, known as amati, folded like an accordion. One of the most mysterious aspects of Maya writing is its complexity. A single word might be represented by multiple symbols, and a single symbol could have multiple readings depending on context. This made the language both flexible and highly precise. For example, rulers often used emblem glyphs, symbols that signified their city-state and divine lineage, allowing them to assert authority across regions without ambiguity. The glyphs also encoded time. Through their long count calendar, the Maya recorded history in a linear sense while simultaneously seeing it as cyclical. Dates were carved with incredible accuracy, marking births, deaths, wars, and celestial events. They saw themselves as participants in a cosmic story where the movement of the planets, the sun, and the moon reflected the fortunes of kings and nations. The knowledge encoded in these glyphs was staggering, yet for centuries, outsiders could not decipher it. European conquerors destroyed most codices, believing them heretical. Monuments were repurposed, stolen, or left to decay. And still, the Maya carried their knowledge in memory and ritual, speaking in glyphs of stone when the written word was forbidden. To understand the Maya, one must walk through their cities and read their stones. In Tikal, Copan, Palenque, and Uxmal, stelae and altars stand as frozen narratives of human ambition and divine favor. Each stone monument was more than decoration. It was a message to gods, ancestors, and future generations. The stelae were massive upright stones carved with images of kings in ritual dress, holding ceremonial objects. Alongside the figures, glyphs detailed events such as victories in battle, ceremonial dedications, and astronomical observations. For example, a stela might celebrate the completion of a ruler's 10-year reign, mark the birth of his heir, and record the precise position of Venus in the sky, all in one continuous inscription. Temples themselves were encoded monuments. At Palenque, the Temple of the Inscriptions holds the tomb of the great ruler Kinich Jenab Pakal, surrounded by glyphs narrating his life, death, and journey to the underworld. The ceiling beams, staircases, and walls all carry hidden messages: spiritual, political, and cosmic. The Maya believed that such inscriptions ensured continuity beyond death. Stone could carry memory where flesh could not. Even the orientation of buildings contained meaning. Temples, pyramids, and observatories were aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and the cycles of Venus. They were not only ceremonial spaces, but also living astronomical charts. Every shadow cast, every stairway climbed, carried encoded meaning, a dialogue between humans, gods, and the cosmos. The carvings were also a language of power. Kings commissioned stelae to immortalize victories and assert divine legitimacy. By inscribing monuments, they literally wrote themselves into eternity. Visitors, traders, and rivals who entered these plazas could read the symbols, understanding the ruler's might, his lineage, and his connection to the heavens. In this way, Maya cities became libraries of stone, their architecture and sculpture inseparable from their written word. Even today, archaeologists spend decades deciphering single stelae. Every glyph is a puzzle, Every image tells multiple stories. The stones carry whispers of lost ceremonies, battles, and astronomical events, waiting patiently for someone to hear them. Most of the Maya codices were destroyed by European conquerors who deemed them heretical. But a handful survived, hidden in remote monasteries or smuggled into private collections. The Dresden Codex, Madrid Codex, and Paris Codex became priceless treasures, windows into the minds of a people who could read the stars like a book and measure time with precision rivaling modern astronomers. The Dresden Codex, in particular, is a masterpiece of scientific knowledge. Its pages record eclipses, the movements of Venus, cycles of the moon, and predictions of ritual events. Each symbol, number, and illustration is both scientific and sacred, blending mathematics with mythology. The Maya had not only observed the heavens, they had calculated them centuries before telescopes existed. The codices also reveal agricultural calendars and medical knowledge. They document planting seasons, rainfall patterns, and herbal remedies, practical wisdom encoded alongside sacred stories. By consulting these texts, scribes ensured that ceremonies, harvests, and astronomical observations remained accurate across generations. But the Maya did not depend solely on codices. Their memory was vast. Priests, elders, and scribes passed knowledge orally, teaching children the sequences of the calendars, genealogies of rulers, and rituals for each festival. When codices were burned, oral tradition preserved the heart of civilization. In modern times, these surviving glyphs and codices continue to reveal secrets. Epigraphers have decoded dynastic histories, astronomical observations, and even references to wars, trade, and political alliances. Each discovery illuminates the complexity of a people once thought mysterious, showing a civilization that intertwined science, spirituality, and statecraft with unrivaled sophistication. The hidden codes of the Maya in stone, bark, and memory remind us that civilization is more than buildings and kings. It is the knowledge passed through generations, the rituals observed under the stars, the understanding that time itself is sacred. The Maya wrote their story not just for the living, but for eternity. And today, the stones, codices, and glyphs still speak, waiting for those who can listen. Long before telescopes and satellites, the Maya were masters of the sky. Their observations were precise, meticulous, and integrated into every aspect of life, from agriculture to religion, from politics to architecture. Every star, planet, and lunar phase carried meaning, and the heavens themselves were seen as a divine canvas. The Maya believed the cosmos was a layered structure. The heavens, the earth, and the underworld were connected by sacred paths and cycles. Time on Earth mirrored the motion of celestial bodies, and knowledge of these cycles allowed rulers to claim divine authority. Priests, known as Achaea, were trained from youth to read the skies. Using nothing but sharp eyes, simple tools, and observational huts, they mapped the movements of Venus, the moon, and the sun with astonishing accuracy. The planet Venus was particularly sacred. Known as Chuk Ek, the Great Star, it was associated with war and prophecy. Its appearances and disappearances were carefully tracked and used to schedule battles or ritual sacrifices. Kings would consult Venus' cycle to determine the most auspicious day to attack enemies or perform ceremonies. Observatories, such as those at Uxmal and Köppen, were aligned with the rise and setting of this celestial body, demonstrating that science and faith were inseparable in Maya thought. The Maya also calculated eclipses. Long before European astronomers, they could predict lunar and solar eclipses with remarkable accuracy. Inscriptions on stelae and codices record these events alongside historical narratives. They believed eclipses were messages from the gods, warnings, or omens to guide rulers in their decisions. To the Maya, Astronomy was not an abstract science. It was the language of the divine, a code to interpret the will of the gods. Their observations were not limited to naked-eye astronomy. Calendars were constructed with intricate care. The Tsokin, a 260-day sacred calendar, was used to determine ceremonial dates, while the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar, guided agricultural cycles. Together, they formed the calendar round, a 52-year cycle intertwining human and celestial events. This deep understanding of time allowed the Maya to coordinate festivals, marriages, and market days with cosmic precision. The Maya did not separate the heavens from their cities. Every major site was built in alignment with celestial events, turning architecture into a tool of observation and ritual. At Chichen Itza, the El Castillo Pyramid, also called the Temple of Kukulkan, demonstrates this with breathtaking ingenuity. During the spring and fall equinoxes, the sun casts shadows along the pyramid steps, creating the illusion of a serpent descending from the temple. This phenomenon connects the king, the god Kukulkan, and the cycles of the heavens in one living demonstration of cosmic order. Observatories like El Caracol in Chichen Itza provided enclosed spaces with windows aligned to Venus, the moon, and solstitial points. Here, priests tracked planetary motion and made predictions crucial for ritual and agriculture. At Tikal, pyramids and temples were oriented to capture the sunrise on significant dates, ensuring that the city's architecture itself became a calendar written in stone. Even the ball courts were not exempt from astronomical symbolism. The Maya associated the Mesoamerican ball game with the movement of celestial bodies, particularly the Sun and Venus, and with the hero twins of the Popol Vuh who journeyed through the underworld. The trajectory of the ball mirrored the cosmic path, a physical reenactment of celestial events and mythological battles. Maya cities were also aligned to sacred mountains, rivers, and caves, which were considered portals connecting the earthly and divine realms. Together with celestial alignment, this created a fully integrated worldview. The gods ruled the heavens, kings ruled the cities, and priests interpreted the stars to maintain balance between them. Knowledge of the sky was therefore a matter of life and death, of prosperity or famine, of victory or defeat. This interweaving of science, spirituality, and politics shows that the Maya were not just observers but participants in a cosmic narrative. Every building, every alignment, and every astronomical observation was a calculated effort to maintain harmony between the human and divine worlds. Maya astronomy reached its pinnacle with the long count calendar, which recorded time on a scale of thousands of years. Unlike linear calendars in the West, the Maya saw time as cyclical. The long count allowed them to mark both historical events and cosmic cycles, giving kings a sense of immortality and linking humanity to the eternal rhythm of the universe. Rituals, wars, and agriculture were planned according to these cycles. The stars were consulted before battles, before the planting of maize, and before royal births. The Maya believed that failure to honor these celestial patterns could bring disaster, droughts, famine, or war. Thus, astronomy was not merely theoretical. It was a tool of survival. The codices reveal precise astronomical calculations. The Dresden Codex, for instance, contains tables predicting the motion of Venus, eclipses, and even rare planetary events. It demonstrates that Maya astronomers could calculate celestial cycles with an accuracy that would astonish 16th century Europeans. The intersection of science and ritual shows a society in which observation was sacred, calculation was worship, and knowledge was power. Yet their understanding was more than mathematics. It was deeply spiritual. Time itself was alive, a cyclical force that demanded respect and attention. Prophecies were often linked to celestial events, and kings claimed legitimacy by demonstrating mastery over cosmic patterns. Monuments, codices, and architecture became living calendars, encoding knowledge that would survive centuries. Even today, Maya communities continue to honor the celestial cycles. Elders track solstices, equinoxes, and lunar phases. Corn planting and harvesting follow age-old patterns linked to the stars. And when astronomers study the ruins of ancient cities, they find not chaos but astonishing precision. A civilization whose knowledge of the heavens rivaled that of any in human history. The Maya did not just watch the sky. They lived in it, conversed with it, and organized their entire world around it. Their stars were guides, teachers, and deities. Their calendars were maps of destiny. And though empires fell and cities were abandoned, this celestial wisdom remains, etched in stone, remembered in memory, and alive in the hearts of the Maya today. Maya religion was a complex tapestry, a living network of gods, spirits, and cosmic forces that governed every aspect of existence. Unlike monotheistic traditions, the Maya recognized multiple deities, each with specialized powers, personalities, and domains, forming a pantheon as intricate as the civilization itself. At the top was the sun god, Kinich, radiant and vital, who journeyed across the sky by day and through the underworld by night. His path symbolized the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Closely associated with the sun were gods of maize, rain, and fertility, such as Chuk, the rain deity, whose watery tears nourished the crops essential for survival. Agriculture was not merely practical. It was sacred, requiring rituals to honor these deities and ensure bounty. The Maya also venerated the underworld, Xibalba, a shadowed realm ruled by dark lords and spirits of disease, death, and trial. The famous story of the hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, depicts their journey through Xibalba, defeating the lords of death and restoring balance to the world. This myth encapsulated the Maya understanding of existence. Life was a perpetual cycle, with challenges and renewal inseparable. Kings and commoners alike saw themselves as participants in this eternal drama. Temples, pyramids, and ceremonial platforms were not mere monuments. They were bridges between Earth and cosmos. The placement of pyramids, the timing of rituals, and the orientation of altars corresponded to celestial events, ensuring the gods' favor. Every act of worship, every prayer, every offering was an attempt to maintain cosmic equilibrium. Sacrifices, whether of maize, animals, or, in certain periods, humans, were conducted to honor the gods and sustain the cycles of life. The gods were deeply personal. Villagers could call upon specific deities for protection, healing, or guidance. Priests acted as intermediaries, interpreting divine will through observation of omens, astronomical patterns, and ritual performance. Religion was not confined to a temple. It permeated homes, fields, marketplaces, and forests. The Maya did not merely worship. They lived within the sacred order, their daily actions guided by cosmic and spiritual law. Central to Maya religion was ritual, a vivid, dramatic, and sometimes terrifying set of practices designed to honor the gods, communicate with ancestors, and maintain cosmic balance. Among the most sacred of these rituals was the offering of blood, seen as a potent life force capable of nourishing the gods. Kings, nobles, and priests performed auto-sacrifice by piercing tongues, ears, or genitals, offering drops of blood into ceremonial bowls. These acts symbolized devotion, humility, and the intimate bond between mortals and the divine. Human sacrifice, though less common than popular myth suggests, was reserved for extraordinary occasions: the dedication of a new temple, the coronation of a king, or the appeasement of a god during times of drought or war. Captives were often chosen, representing the enemies of the state or forces opposed to the community. The ritual itself was highly codified. Priests conducted ceremonies with chants, incense, and rhythmic drums, ensuring that the offering was performed correctly to maintain favor with the gods. Corn, the sacred crop, was central not only to life but also to ritual. Maya myths teach that humans themselves were created from maize dough, making the harvest a sacred act of continuity. Offerings of corn, in the form of cakes or symbolic figurines, were common at festivals and in private homes. Fields were blessed at the beginning of planting and at harvest, with rituals invoking Chuk for rain and fertility. Even the act of cooking maize carried spiritual significance, connecting the mundane to the sacred. Fire, too, was crucial. Ceremonial fires acted as channels, carrying prayers and offerings to the heavens. In temples, hearths were lit for purification, divination, and communication with ancestors. Festivals often featured massive bonfires, synchronized with solar cycles or equinoxes, reinforcing the connection between earth, fire, and sky. Through blood, corn, and fire, the Maya engaged with the cosmos directly, seeing their survival as contingent upon honoring the sacred order that governed both nature and time. Rituals were also deeply intertwined with social structure. Kings conducted public ceremonies to demonstrate their divine legitimacy, while the common people participated through offerings, dances, and chants. Festivals became moments when the cosmic, political, and communal realms merged. The heavens, earth, and underworld momentarily unified in a living expression of Maya faith. The Maya calendar structured every aspect of religious life. Festivals were meticulously timed according to the Tzolk'in and Hab cycles, ensuring that worship aligned with cosmic patterns. Solar and lunar events marked critical moments in the ritual year. Equinoxes, solstices, eclipses, all considered opportunities for renewal and reflection. The new fire ceremony, celebrated every 52 years at the end of a calendar round, exemplified this integration. The Maya feared cosmic disruption at the end of the cycle, and the ritual acted as a spiritual reset. Fires were extinguished and then rekindled, sacrifices were made, and the community reaffirmed its connection to the gods. Such ceremonies combined fear, reverence, and hope, a recognition that humanity existed within an intricate, ordered universe. Divination and prophecy were integral to religion. Priests observed the heavens, the behavior of animals, and signs in nature to interpret the gods' intentions. Kings consulted omens before wars, marriages, or building projects, believing that divine insight guided human decision. The hero twins myths reinforced the belief that the world is a constant interplay between challenge and renewal, a narrative that shaped both political and spiritual life. Maya religion also emphasized cycles of life and death. Ancestors were venerated, believed to guide the living and mediate with the gods. Tombs and burial offerings reflected a continuity between the living and the dead. Pyramids, stelae, and temples were not only commemorative, they were conduits through which the present and past communicated. Even after conquest, forced conversion, and centuries of suppression, these spiritual traditions endured. Maya communities preserved rituals, blended Catholic saints with traditional deities, and continued to celebrate cosmic festivals. Their worldview, centered on balance, cycles, and sacred authority, persists today. Through gods, rituals, and sacred time, the Maya maintained a civilization that was both practical and deeply spiritual. Life was a dance with the cosmos, and survival depended on understanding one's place within it. Even in modern times, this spiritual foundation endures, reminding us that the Maya did not simply build pyramids or watch the stars. They lived within the sacred order of the universe itself. In the Maya world, war was more than mere conflict. It was a sacred duty, a demonstration of divine favor, and a tool for political control. Every city-state maintained its warriors, But more importantly, every king had a responsibility to lead in battle or oversee campaigns, asserting his legitimacy not only through diplomacy, but through the courage and strategy displayed on the battlefield. Kings were expected to embody the will of the gods. A ruler's military successes were seen as proof of divine favor, while defeats were interpreted as cosmic disapproval. Before every battle, kings consulted priests and astrologers who interpreted omens from the stars, the flight of birds, and the movements of Venus. Such readings determined when to strike, retreat, or negotiate. Victory was never merely strategic, it was cosmological. The Maya practiced a highly ritualized form of warfare. Battles often began with ceremonial displays. Warriors donned elaborate headdresses, face paint, and animal masks representing gods or sacred animals. Drums, conch shells, and chants echoed across fields and plazas, transforming combat into both spectacle and spiritual exercise. Warriors believed that courage and precision in battle pleased the gods and ensured the continued prosperity of their city-state. Prisoners were a central aspect of warfare. Captured enemies were often sacrificed in religious ceremonies to honor gods such as Chak, the rain god, or Kawil, the god of lightning and divine authority. Such sacrifices were not only spiritual acts but political statements, demonstrating a city-state's dominance over rivals. A king who returned from war with captives to the temple steps reinforced his divine legitimacy, his power inseparable from the sacred cycle. Warfare also involved highly developed strategies. Maya generals understood terrain, alliances, and psychological intimidation. Fortifications, watchtowers, and hidden ambush points were common. Armies were trained to use spears, atlatls, and obsidian-edged weapons with deadly precision. But beyond brute force, Maya leaders relied on ritual timing, coordinated attacks based on celestial observations, and ceremonial declarations to align the spiritual and material world. Maya warfare was structured and sophisticated, blending tactical ingenuity with ritual performance. Armies were often composed of commoners conscripted for campaigns, noble warriors, and elite units trained from youth. Each city-state had its own military hierarchy, with captains, scouts, and ceremonial leaders coordinating maneuvers. Battles could be prolonged and strategic rather than chaotic. Armies often targeted rival city-states for control of trade routes, water sources, and fertile land. The control of obsidian quarries, jade mines, and cenotes, all vital resources, frequently fueled conflicts. Skirmishes and sieges were as much about political leverage as survival, with negotiated truces and arranged marriages acting as extensions of military strategy. Rituals preceded battle and often determined tactics. Before engagement, warriors might offer blood to the gods, seeking divine favor. Shamans or priests would enter trance states, interpreting dreams, omens, or visions to guide generals. Certain battles were timed according to lunar or Venus cycles to maximize success. It was believed that a misalignment with cosmic rhythms could doom even the most formidable army. The battlefield itself was a theater of symbolism. Warriors carried banners depicting gods and ancestral emblems. Shields were decorated with glyphs, invoking protection and ferocity. Captured rulers were paraded before temples or stelae, reminding citizens of the intertwined power of kingship, divine favor, and martial prowess. Despite the ceremonial and strategic complexity, warfare was brutal. The Maya valued bravery, skill, and endurance, but they were also pragmatic. Ambushes, feigned retreats, and psychological tactics were common. Some city-states even built concealed pits and spike traps along expected enemy paths. Combat was not only about heroism but also intelligence and preparation, reflecting a culture that revered both cunning and valor. Wars between Maya city-states were cyclical, mirroring their understanding of time itself. Conquest, tribute, and ritualized conflict reinforced the cosmic order. A victorious ruler would expand territory, secure tribute from defeated cities, and dedicate monuments to commemorate victories, all while ensuring that these actions aligned with the sacred cycles of the calendar. Tribute was both practical and symbolic. Cities forced to pay gold, maize, textiles, or captives acknowledged the dominance of the victor, but these offerings also acted as ritual acknowledgement of divine favor. Kings immortalized victories on stelae, depicting themselves as warriors blessed by gods, conquering rivals, and restoring cosmic balance. In this way, military campaigns were inseparable from religion, politics, and historical record-keeping. Certain wars were fought for entirely ritualistic purposes. The taking of captives for sacrifice or demonstration of power often motivated campaigns more than territorial gain. The hero twins myth in the Popol Vuh mirrored this worldview. Conflict, cunning, and trial were necessary to maintain balance, illustrating that war was not merely human struggle but participation in a divine narrative. Fortified cities, such as Tikal, Kopan, and Calakmul, became centers of military power. Alliances were fluid, with city-states sometimes uniting to resist stronger neighbors or rivals. Spies, emissaries, and messengers conveyed intelligence and negotiated truces. Knowledge of terrain, rivers, and jungle paths gave smaller forces opportunities to challenge larger armies. Maya warfare demonstrates the civilization's sophistication, blending ritual, strategy, and politics into an integrated system. It was not merely survival. It was expression of power, divine favor, and participation in a cosmic order that governed every aspect of life. Even today, the ruins of battlegrounds, fortresses, and stelae carved with scenes of conflict reveal a civilization that understood war as sacred, disciplined, and eternal, a vital thread in the fabric of Maya identity. Maya civilization was not only a marvel of architecture, astronomy, and warfare. It was also a sophisticated economic network stretching across Mesoamerica. While kings and priests often dominate our historical imagination, it was trade that bound city-states together and allowed civilization to thrive. Roads, rivers, and coastal routes served as arteries through which goods, ideas, and culture flowed. Markets were vibrant centers of daily life. Commoners, artisans, and merchants gathered to exchange maize, beans, and cacao, staples of Maya survival, alongside precious commodities like jade, obsidian, and feathers of the quetzal. Cacao beans were particularly valuable, functioning as both currency and luxury item. Consumed as a bitter, spiced drink reserved for nobles and warriors. The Maya understood its worth not just materially but socially, using it to reward loyalty or seal political alliances. Obsidian, mined from the highlands of present-day Guatemala and Mexico, was a critical material. Its razor-sharp edges produced weapons, tools, and ritual blades. A warrior's atlatl or a priest's sacrificial knife was often crafted from obsidian, connecting trade directly to both survival and spirituality. Jade, on the other hand, symbolized eternity, power, and divine favor. Carved into masks, jewelry, and ceremonial objects, jade flowed along the same trade routes that carried food, pottery, and textiles, linking cities across hundreds of kilometers. Trade was not limited to tangible goods. Knowledge, religious practices, and artistic styles traveled along these networks. Pottery techniques, glyphic innovations, and even ritual practices spread through trade and diplomacy, creating cultural continuity while allowing local diversity. Markets were arenas of cultural negotiation as well as commerce, where language, custom, and tradition intersected. Every cacao bean or jade bead carried more than its material value. It was a thread connecting the Maya to the wider world. Trade networks were intertwined with political power. City-states depended on the flow of goods to sustain populations and assert dominance. A ruler who controlled jade mines, obsidian sources, or salt flats could leverage wealth into political alliances or military campaigns. Diplomatic marriages, tribute agreements, and ceremonial exchanges often accompanied commercial activity, reinforcing social hierarchies and cosmological order. Long-distance trade was sophisticated. Canoes navigated rivers and coastal waters, while runners carried goods along cleared roads through dense jungle. Certain commodities, such as cacao, salt, and quetzal feathers, were highly controlled, transported with care, and often taxed or reserved for elites. Traders were valued members of society. They were trusted to maintain relationships, negotiate deals, and deliver goods safely, often acting as agents of both commerce and diplomacy. Markets themselves were centers of regulation and law. Standardized weights, measures, and systems of exchange ensured fairness and efficiency. Ceremonial marketplaces, such as those at Copen and Tikal, became focal points not only for trade but for ritual and social interaction. Prices and availability were influenced by religious festivals, harvest cycles, and political events, demonstrating the integration of economy, time, and ritual in Maya society. Regional specialization allowed each city to contribute unique products. Some regions excelled in textiles, others in pottery, and still others in metallurgy or luxury items. This interdependence fostered collaboration, competition, and resilience, allowing the civilization to flourish even in the face of environmental challenges or warfare. Trade was a lifeline connecting city to city, jungle to coast, and heaven to earth, ensuring that Maya culture survived and evolved across centuries. The accumulation of wealth in Maya society was not only practical but deeply symbolic. Items like jade, quetzal feathers, gold, and intricately woven textiles were markers of status, power, and divine favor. Rulers displayed these treasures during ceremonies and on monumental architecture, signaling their connection to the gods and their ability to maintain social and cosmic order. Luxury items were also integrated into religious and political rituals. Cacao, finely woven cloth, and precious stones were offered to deities, used as gifts to cement alliances, or presented to warriors as rewards. Wealth reinforced the social hierarchy, but it also carried spiritual weight. The act of giving could honor gods, ancestors, and city alike. The display of riches was therefore both practical and ceremonial, a visible manifestation of power, devotion, and control. Trade also drove innovation. Craft specialization produced high-quality pottery, jewelry, tools, and ritual items that were valued across the region. Techniques in carving, weaving, and metallurgy were transmitted along trade routes, creating networks of expertise that transcended city-state boundaries. Artisans became cultural ambassadors, carrying not just goods but ideas and spiritual symbolism embedded in their creations. Yet wealth was fragile, dependent on resources, climate, and political stability. Droughts, warfare, or the collapse of key trade routes could destabilize entire regions. City-states invested in infrastructure, roads, causeways, ports, and storage facilities to safeguard resources and ensure continuity. The ability to manage trade, protect wealth, and distribute resources effectively became as vital as military prowess or spiritual authority. Through commerce, the Maya demonstrated that civilization is not only built in stone and glyphs, but also in relationships, exchange, and shared prosperity. Trade was more than wealth. It was a lifeline, a system of communication, and a reflection of the cosmic order, binding people, gods, and cities into one living, interconnected civilization. Between 800 and 1000 CE, the great Maya city-states of the southern lowlands, such as Tikal, Copan, and Palenque, experienced a profound transformation. What had once been bustling urban centers with monumental architecture, flourishing trade networks, and powerful kings became abandoned ruins, overtaken by jungle. The collapse of the classic Maya civilization has puzzled historians, archaeologists, and scientists for centuries. Unlike the sudden fall of empires in other regions, the Maya decline was staggered, uneven, and complex. At its height, the southern lowlands had been home to hundreds of cities, each with elaborate palaces, temples, and ball courts. Kings commissioned stelae and altars to commemorate victories, record celestial events, and demonstrate divine favor. Agriculture supported dense populations, and trade routes brought precious goods such as jade, obsidian, salt, and cacao across vast distances. The southern cities were cultural, political, and economic powerhouses. By the 9th century, inscriptions and archaeological evidence indicate a sharp decline. Kings ceased commissioning monuments, stelae went uncarved, and once vibrant plazas fell silent. Population centers shrank, and many cities were abandoned entirely. The monumental architecture remained, but the life that had animated it, governance, trade, ritual, and culture, largely vanished. Meanwhile, northern centers like Chichen Itza and Uxmal continued to thrive for centuries, suggesting that the collapse was regional rather than absolute. Researchers have pieced together clues from soil studies, tree rings, pollen analysis, and inscriptions. Evidence shows a combination of environmental stress, social upheaval, and political fragmentation. Deforestation and soil exhaustion may have reduced agricultural productivity. Water scarcity, indicated by drought patterns in tree rings, may have created crises for densely populated cities dependent on rain-fed reservoirs. Famine and disease likely accompanied these stresses, weakening societies from within. The collapse was not a single event but a cascade of failures. Political rivalries, warfare, environmental change, and economic disruption converged to erode the complex systems that sustained the southern lowlands. Yet even in this decline, the Maya spirit endured. People moved, adapted, and carried traditions to the northern cities and highland regions, ensuring continuity even amidst crisis. A major factor contributing to the Maya collapse was environmental stress, particularly prolonged periods of drought. Scientific studies of tree rings, sediment cores, and isotopic data suggest that between 800 and 1000 CE, the southern lowlands experienced severe and repeated droughts. Rainfall patterns became unpredictable, and reservoirs that had supported urban populations dwindled. The ability to grow staple crops like maize, beans, and squash was compromised, undermining both subsistence and trade. Deforestation amplified these problems. The construction of monumental architecture, combined with agriculture, required clearing vast areas of jungle. This deforestation led to soil erosion, decreased water retention, and reduced fertility. Crops failed more frequently, food stores diminished, and malnutrition likely became widespread. Farmers may have been forced to abandon lands that had supported generations, creating social unrest. The Maya elite, reliant on tribute and centralized authority, were particularly vulnerable. Kings derived legitimacy from their ability to provide ritual leadership, maintain cosmic balance, and ensure prosperity. When drought struck and crops failed, the authority of rulers was questioned. Rituals that once secured divine favor could no longer guarantee survival. Social cohesion frayed, and political fragmentation became inevitable. Archaeological evidence also indicates increased conflict during this period. Defensive walls, fortifications, and signs of warfare suggest that competition for dwindling resources intensified. Cities that had once been allies became rivals, and internal rebellions may have compounded external threats. In some cases, Rulers were overthrown or abandoned their cities entirely, leaving monuments unfinished and ceremonial spaces empty. Yet, even in the face of environmental catastrophe, the Maya demonstrated resilience. Northern cities adapted by developing irrigation, creating artificial reservoirs, and shifting agricultural practices. The legacy of environmental knowledge survived in oral traditions, guiding later generations in managing water, soil, and crops. While the southern lowlands faced collapse, the Maya civilization did not vanish. It transformed and endured. Environmental stress was compounded by intense warfare and political fragmentation. Archaeological and epigraphic evidence shows a marked increase in conflicts among city-states during the Terminal Classic period. Stele inscriptions record raids, conquests, and the overthrow of rulers, often occurring in rapid succession. Alliances formed and broke repeatedly, as cities competed for land, water, trade routes, and prestige. The political landscape became unstable. Centralized authority weakened as regional powers emerged. Formerly dominant cities lost influence, while ambitious local leaders carved out their own domains. Without strong kings to coordinate infrastructure, manage trade, or enforce tribute systems, the complex networks that supported urban life unraveled. The combination of resource scarcity and political turmoil created a feedback loop. Famine fueled conflict, and conflict worsened scarcity. Social upheaval also played a critical role. The Maya population was dense in major urban centers, and when food shortages became severe, mass migration occurred. Families abandoned their homes, leaving cities half-empty or entirely deserted. Labor systems that maintained terraces, reservoirs, and roads collapsed, accelerating decline. Religious institutions, once central to maintaining order and morale, struggled to function effectively. Ritual authority, tied to material abundance, weakened as the cosmic and earthly balance seemed to fail. Despite the dramatic collapse of the southern lowlands, the Maya civilization was not extinguished. Northern centers adapted to changing conditions, developing new trade networks, ceremonial architecture, and political structures. Highland populations continued cultural traditions, preserving languages, rituals, and astronomical knowledge. The collapse was therefore not an annihilation but a transformation, a reorganization of power and culture in response to environmental and social pressures. Today, the ruins of Tikal, Köpen, and Uxmal stand as monuments not only to lost grandeur but to resilience. They remind us that civilizations are dynamic systems, vulnerable to nature, politics, and society, yet capable of adaptation, migration, and renewal. The classic Maya may have abandoned their cities, but their culture survived, evolving into the modern Maya communities that endure across Central America today. The Maya did not build monuments merely for display. They constructed cosmic stairways, physical embodiments of spiritual and political power. Pyramids were designed as vertical axes connecting earth to sky, bridging the human and divine realms. The act of climbing the steps was both literal and symbolic, representing ascent toward the gods, the heavens, and the underworld. Take the Temple of the Inscriptions in Palenque, for example. Its massive stone stairway leads not only to a temple atop the pyramid, but also to the tomb of Kinich Janab Pakal, a ruler whose life and afterlife were meticulously documented in stucco panels and inscriptions. The architecture reflects the Maya belief in cyclical time. Life, death, and rebirth are encoded in every step, every carving, and every ceremonial chamber. The pyramids of Tikal, Uxmal, and Köpen also demonstrate this principle. Each is aligned with celestial phenomena, solstices, equinoxes, and the rising and setting of planets. These alignments were not accidental. They reflected the Maya view that architecture and astronomy were inseparable. The pyramids themselves were living instruments, calendars in stone, and stages for sacred ceremonies. Symbolism extended to the decorative elements of the pyramids. Carvings of serpents, jaguars, and gods adorned staircases and facades, telling stories of cosmic battles, heroic myths, and divine authority. The serpents at El Castillo in Chichen Itza, descending the pyramid during equinoxes as sunlight creates a shadow, are a dramatic example of the fusion of art, architecture, and astronomical observation. In essence, Maya pyramids were theaters of power, faith, and knowledge. They communicated the authority of rulers, the favor of gods, and the cyclical nature of time to everyone who saw them, citizens, visitors, and even enemies. They were as much instruments of governance and ritual as they were expressions of creativity and vision. While pyramids reached skyward, palaces and court complexes were horizontal manifestations of Maya power and culture. These sprawling structures housed rulers, administrators, scribes, and priests, serving as centers of governance, ritual, and art. Stucco walls, painted murals, and carved doorways communicated authority and cosmology, blending aesthetic brilliance with political messaging. At Palenque, the palace complex features a labyrinth of courtyards, corridors, and towers adorned with glyphs and bas-reliefs. Every carving tells a story: dynastic lineage, ceremonial rituals, and the ruler's connection to gods. The artwork was not merely decorative. It reinforced hierarchy, legitimized rulership, and created a sacred atmosphere that reminded all visitors of divine order. Court complexes were also spaces of ceremony and spectacle. Open plazas hosted political gatherings, athletic events, and religious rituals. Murals often depicted deities, celestial phenomena, and mythological scenes, serving both as storytelling devices and as a visual representation of cultural values. Architecture and art merged to create immersive experiences that educated, inspired, and controlled social behavior. Even the smallest artistic details were purposeful. Door lintels, carved panels, and painted murals were imbued with symbolism. Depictions of jaguars symbolized strength and the underworld. Serpents represented fertility and celestial movement, and maze motifs conveyed life, sustenance, and rebirth. Palaces, in this way, became living texts, encoding cultural knowledge, political ideology, and sacred belief in stone and paint. Through palaces and court complexes, the Maya transformed architecture into language. Every wall and courtyard was a message, every carving a story, and every decorative motif a bridge between the earthly, the divine, and the eternal. Beyond architecture, Maya art thrived in sculpture, murals, ceramics, and ritual objects. Monumental stelae, altars, and carved lintels immortalized rulers, victories, and sacred myths. These pieces were highly detailed, often depicting historical events with astonishing precision, including names, dates, and sequences of rituals, battles, or celestial observations. Murals in tombs and temples showcased a sophisticated understanding of perspective, symbolism, and narrative. Scenes depicted deities, the hero twins, ceremonies, and everyday life, blending myth with history. Colors were not decorative choices alone. Red symbolized blood and life, blue symbolized water and fertility, and black represented death and the underworld. The combination of art, color, and space created immersive experiences that guided worshippers through myth and ritual. Sculptural works, from jade masks to stone altars, carried both spiritual and social weight. Rulers used them to project authority, commemorate victories, and assert divine favor. Ceramics and smaller art objects, often traded between cities, reinforced cultural cohesion, spreading motifs, myths, and aesthetic styles across regions. Every object had meaning. Every symbol conveyed information about cosmology, lineage, or power. The integration of art, architecture, and ritual demonstrates the Maya understanding of form and function as inseparable. Structures and objects were not merely utilitarian or decorative. They were tools of memory, ideology, and religious practice. From the monumental pyramids to intricately painted ceramics, Maya art expressed the civilization's core beliefs. Time is cyclical, authority is divine, and life is inseparable from the sacred cosmos. Through their visual culture, the Maya communicated across centuries. Even today, archaeologists, historians, and visitors marvel at the precision, symbolism, and ingenuity of Maya art and architecture. A testament to a civilization that understood that stone, paint, and space could carry ideas as powerfully as words. The Maya civilization was far more than temples, pyramids, and kings. It was a vibrant society with intricate social hierarchies, bustling marketplaces, and tightly knit communities. Society was organized into a clear hierarchy, but unlike rigid, impersonal systems, Maya social structure balanced authority with communal interdependence. At the top were kings or a Jah who combined political, religious, and military power. They were seen as intermediaries between gods and humans, their legitimacy confirmed through rituals, astronomical knowledge, and monumental constructions. Nobles and priests supported the king, managing cities, organizing ceremonies, and conducting diplomacy. Nobles often owned land, supervised craft production, and wielded influence over regional trade. Their lives were steeped in ritual obligation, education, and preparation to maintain authority. Below the elite were artisans, traders, and skilled workers, forming the backbone of Maya economic and cultural life. These individuals produced pottery, textiles, jewelry, and tools, as well as creating murals, sculptures, and codices. Craftsmen often trained in workshops within palaces or ceremonial centers, passing skills through generations. Traders connected cities across vast distances, transporting essential goods like maize, cacao, jade, and obsidian, ensuring both material survival and cultural exchange. The majority of the population were farmers and laborers. They cultivated maize, beans, squash, and chili peppers, constructing terraces and maintaining irrigation systems that maximized the land's potential. Villages often centered around plazas, ball courts, and small temples, creating a strong sense of community. Social cohesion was reinforced through shared labor, festivals, and ritual obligations. Despite social hierarchies, survival depended on cooperation, shared knowledge, and collective engagement in agricultural and ceremonial life. Children were integrated early into these roles. Boys learned farming, hunting, or crafts depending on family occupation, while girls learned weaving, cooking, and domestic management. Education was informal but intensive, embedded in everyday tasks and ceremonial participation. Maya society valued practical skills, spiritual knowledge, and the ability to navigate social hierarchies, creating well-rounded members capable of sustaining the civilization's complex systems. Family was central to Maya daily life, both as an economic unit and as a spiritual institution. Extended families often lived in compounds near fields, sharing labor, food preparation, and childcare. Houses were modest, constructed from perishable materials like wood, adobe, and thatch, but arranged thoughtfully to accommodate daily life, ritual practices, and extended kin networks. Food played a vital role in family and ritual life. Maize was the cornerstone of the diet, ground into masa for tortillas, tamales, or porridge. Beans, squash, and chili peppers supplemented protein and nutrition, while cacao provided a luxury beverage for elites and ceremonial occasions. Meals were communal, reinforcing bonds and social roles, with men, women, and children sharing work and consumption in a cooperative cycle. Ritual permeated daily existence. Families maintained small shrines in their homes, offering maize, water, flowers, or incense to household gods and ancestors. Daily prayers, purification rituals, and offerings were acts of devotion and practical protection. Ancestors were believed to guide family decisions, protect crops, and maintain harmony. This intimate integration of spirituality into ordinary life illustrates how the Maya worldview merged practical living with cosmic order. Work and leisure were also intertwined with ritual. Agricultural activities, market exchanges, and crafts often included ceremonial songs, chants, or offerings to ensure success. Festivals brought communities together in dance, music, and feasting, reinforcing identity and social cohesion. Ball games, performed both in grand plazas and smaller village courts, were not only recreation but also reenactments of mythological narratives, connecting everyday life to sacred stories of gods and heroes. Through this lens, the Maya did not experience life as merely survival. It was a rhythm synchronized with the cosmos, the seasons, and the moral and spiritual obligations embedded in their culture. Family units, crafts, rituals, and labor combined to create a society that functioned both efficiently and spiritually, sustaining civilization across centuries in harmony with their environment. Education in Maya society was informal but comprehensive, blending practical skills, spiritual knowledge, and social responsibility. Children observed rituals, assisted in agricultural work, and apprenticed in trades. They learned mathematics, astronomy, and writing from elders, priests, or scribes, ensuring that both practical and ceremonial knowledge passed seamlessly from one generation to the next. Knowledge of the calendar, celestial patterns, and religious obligations was considered essential for survival and prosperity. Economic life was embedded in daily routines. Farmers, artisans, and traders contributed to a complex system of resource production and exchange. Agriculture required careful timing, often coordinated with astronomical observations and ritual calendars. Markets functioned as centers for commerce, social interaction, and cultural dissemination. Even seemingly mundane activities, grinding maize, weaving cloth, or crafting pottery, carried symbolic weight, connecting labor to spiritual and societal order. Life cycles were also mirrored in ritual cycles. Birth, marriage, and death were marked by ceremonies that reaffirmed communal and spiritual connections. Burial practices reflected social status, cosmology, and reverence for ancestors. Funerary offerings included jade, pottery, and figurines, symbolizing sustenance, protection, and continuity beyond death. Ancestors were believed to intervene in daily life, providing guidance, protection, and balance. Despite the hardships of agriculture, warfare, or environmental challenges, Maya daily life reflected a profound integration of work, spirituality, and community. Every action had meaning, every role was significant, and every household contributed to the functioning of a larger cosmic and social order. The rhythm of life was cyclical, harmonious, and resilient, a testament to the ingenuity, adaptability, and deep cultural coherence of the Maya people. Through family, labor, ritual, and communal engagement, the Maya created a society that was not only materially successful but spiritually grounded, ensuring survival, prosperity, and cultural continuity for centuries. Daily life was a living reflection of the civilization's core values: balance, reciprocity, and reverence for the natural and divine worlds. The Maya were unparalleled observers of the cosmos. Their understanding of astronomy was not simply a curiosity but an essential component of their survival, religion, and governance. They developed sophisticated methods to track celestial bodies, predict eclipses, and align their calendars with the movements of the sun, moon, and planets. Using carefully placed observatories, such as El Caracol in Chichen Itza, priests meticulously recorded the motions of Venus, Mercury, and the moon. Venus, in particular, was central to warfare and ritual planning. The Maya could predict its appearance and disappearance with remarkable accuracy, using its cycle to guide battles, sacrifices, and ceremonial events. These observations were integrated into codices like the Dresden Codex, which contains tables tracking Venus, lunar phases, and solar eclipses, demonstrating knowledge rivaling that of medieval Europe centuries later. The Maya developed the Tzolk'in, a 260-day sacred calendar, and the Hab, a 365-day solar calendar. The intersection of these two calendars, the calendar round, created a 52-year cycle crucial for scheduling ceremonies, agricultural cycles, and political events. Meanwhile, the long count calendar allowed them to record historical events across centuries, providing a framework for understanding the cyclical nature of time and linking kings and cities to cosmic order. Timekeeping extended into architecture. Temples and pyramids were oriented towards solstices, equinoxes, and other celestial alignments. During the equinox, for example, the sun casts shadows that create the illusion of a descending serpent along the steps of the El Castillo Pyramid in Chichen Itza. These precise alignments illustrate how scientific observation and religious belief were inseparable, with each architectural feature serving as both instrument and symbol. The Maya approach to astronomy and time reflected a worldview in which human action, natural phenomena, and divine will were interconnected. Observation was not passive. It was a form of participation in the cosmos, a science of survival, governance, and spiritual understanding that demonstrated the profound ingenuity of Maya civilization. The Maya were exceptional engineers, creating infrastructure capable of supporting dense populations, monumental architecture, and complex social systems. They mastered the use of stone, mortar, and stucco to build cities that would endure for centuries despite environmental challenges. Pyramids, palaces, ball courts, and ceremonial plazas were constructed with meticulous attention to alignment, proportion, and durability. Urban planning incorporated both practicality and ritual. Cities were often centered around ceremonial plazas, with residential, administrative, and marketplace zones strategically placed to optimize social cohesion and resource distribution. Causeways, or sakbiab, connected distant cities, facilitating trade, communication, and military movement. These raised roads, sometimes stretching tens of kilometers, demonstrate an understanding of terrain, drainage, and logistics. Water management was a particularly notable achievement. In regions with seasonal rainfall, Maya engineers constructed reservoirs, canals, and cisterns to store and distribute water. Cities like Tikal, Yaxchilan, and Palenque relied on these systems to support agriculture, domestic use, and ritual activities. Ingenious designs incorporated natural topography, ensuring that water reached terraces and fields efficiently, preventing both drought and flooding. Agricultural innovation complemented urban engineering. Terracing, raised fields, and soil enrichment techniques maximized yields in challenging environments. The Maya cultivated maize, beans, squash, and chili peppers using strategies that prevented soil depletion, conserved water, and ensured long-term sustainability. These methods illustrate a sophisticated understanding of ecology, reflecting the civilization's capacity to adapt science to survival and prosperity. Even decorative and symbolic elements had functional purposes. Pyramids were not only ceremonial but also structurally optimized to withstand earthquakes. Sculptural motifs and glyphs reinforced cultural narratives, while sometimes encoding practical information about history, astronomy, and civic life. Engineering, architecture, and artistry merged seamlessly, revealing a society that saw science and aesthetics as inseparable. Maya achievements in mathematics and writing were equally extraordinary. The Maya developed a vigesimal, base, 20, numeral system, incorporating the concept of 0 centuries before Europe. This allowed complex calculations for astronomy, architecture, and calendrical cycles. Their mathematical prowess enabled them to construct pyramids with precise measurements, predict celestial events, and maintain accurate historical records over millennia. Writing was equally advanced. The Maya script, a combination of logograms and syllabic signs, recorded history, myth, astronomy, and ritual in codices, stelae, and temple inscriptions. These records served multiple purposes: documenting dynasties, instructing priests, commemorating victories, and codifying knowledge. Texts like the Dresden, Madrid, and Paris codices reveal the integration of mathematics, astronomy, and divination, demonstrating the Maya's capacity to translate observation and calculation into symbolic and practical knowledge. Technology extended to daily life and ritual tools. Obsidian blades were sharpened to near perfection for cutting, crafting, and ceremonial purposes. Textiles were woven with intricate patterns symbolizing cosmology. Ceramics, murals, and metalwork reflected both aesthetic innovation and functional use, blending art and engineering. Canoes, fishing tools, and agricultural implements further illustrate the Maya's mastery of practical technology in harmony with their environment. In essence, Maya science and technology were deeply intertwined with cultural, spiritual, and political life. Every innovation, from calendars and pyramids to water systems and codices, was designed not only to serve practical purposes, but also to reflect and reinforce the Maya worldview. Their achievements reveal a civilization that understood complexity, precision, and interconnectedness long before many of the technological revolutions of Europe. The legacy of Maya science and technology endures today, offering insight into a civilization that harmonized observation, innovation, and spiritual understanding into a unified, sustainable, and remarkable culture. Despite centuries of conquest, colonization, and environmental challenges, Maya culture has endured in Central America. Millions of Maya descendants still live in Guatemala, Mexico, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador, speaking more than 20 distinct languages that preserve linguistic diversity and ancestral knowledge. These languages carry the memory of glyphs, oral traditions, and rituals that date back thousands of years. Cultural practices persist alongside modern life. Traditional dress, weaving patterns, and artisan crafts remain vibrant in markets and villages, symbolizing identity and continuity. Festivals, ceremonies, and dances retain connections to ancient cosmology, agricultural cycles, and spiritual beliefs. For instance, maize, still central to the diet and ritual practice, continues to symbolize life, sustenance, and divine favor. Rituals of planting, harvesting, and offering reflect the same sacred understanding of balance and interdependence that guided the classic Maya. Education and oral transmission of knowledge have been vital for cultural survival. Elders teach children traditional farming methods, storytelling, music, and the significance of astronomical cycles. Stories of the hero twins, creation myths, and ancestral legends continue to provide moral guidance, social cohesion, and spiritual grounding. In this way, Maya culture has not merely survived but evolved, adapting to new environments while retaining its essential worldview. Even political and social structures bear traces of historical continuity. Local governance, communal decision-making, and systems of tribute and labor often echo ancient models, demonstrating the resilience and adaptability of Maya society. The survival of language, ritual, and governance illustrates that the Maya were never fully conquered. Their civilization persists in living form, deeply integrated into daily life and regional identity. The Maya legacy extends far beyond cultural survival. It has influenced science, art, and global understanding of ancient civilizations. Archaeological discoveries have revealed a civilization with remarkable precision in astronomy, mathematics, and engineering, challenging assumptions about pre-Columbian societies. Modern scientists study Maya calendars, astronomical observations, and architecture to gain insights into sustainable agriculture, climate adaptation, and celestial mechanics. Art and architecture continue to inspire. Murals, pyramids, and sculptures inform modern artistic movements, blending symbolic imagery, geometric precision, and storytelling. Museums worldwide exhibit Maya artifacts, educating millions about their achievements and preserving their legacy for future generations. The artistry is not just aesthetic. It reflects complex social, political, and spiritual knowledge encoded in every motif, pattern, and glyph. Education has also become a tool for cultural revival. Universities and research centers in Central America and beyond study Maya languages, codices, and traditions, fostering appreciation and understanding. Community-based programs teach traditional crafts, astronomy, and ecological stewardship, bridging ancient wisdom and contemporary practice. By integrating ancestral knowledge with modern methods, the Maya legacy demonstrates that ancient innovation remains relevant and practical, offering lessons for sustainability, resilience, and holistic living. The influence extends even further into global consciousness. Awareness of Maya achievements challenges Eurocentric historical narratives and broadens our understanding of human ingenuity. From calendars and astronomy to civic organization and artistic expression, the Maya have left an enduring imprint that continues to shape science, culture, and education worldwide. Perhaps the most profound aspect of Maya legacy is spiritual continuity. Modern Maya communities maintain rituals, cosmological beliefs, and ethical frameworks that echo the practices of their ancestors. Ceremonies honoring the sun, moon, rain, and maize remain central, linking human activity with natural and cosmic cycles. These practices reflect a worldview in which harmony with the environment, respect for ancestors, and balance between the material and spiritual realms are essential. Nature retains sacred significance. Mountains, rivers, caves, and cenotes are considered living spaces imbued with spiritual power. Pilgrimages to these sites continue, connecting communities with the land and their heritage. Rituals of planting, harvesting, and offering maintain ecological awareness, reinforcing sustainable practices rooted in millennia of experience. The Maya understanding of reciprocity, giving to nature as it gives to humanity, remains a powerful lesson for contemporary environmental stewardship. Globally, the Maya legacy is recognized as a profound achievement in human history. Archaeological sites, research, and cultural preservation projects highlight the civilization's contributions to astronomy, mathematics, art, and governance. Meanwhile, living Maya communities embody the resilience, creativity, and spiritual insight that allowed their culture to survive colonization, environmental challenges, and social upheaval. Their story is one of adaptation, endurance, and continuity, a reminder that civilizations are not only monuments in stone, but living, breathing cultures capable of influencing the future. Through language, ritual, science, art, and ecological wisdom, the Maya civilization continues to inspire, teach, and endure. Their legacy proves that the story of humanity is not linear but cyclical, interwoven with culture, environment, and the cosmos. A lesson written not just in ruins and codices, but in the living communities that carry Maya knowledge into the modern world. And that brings us to the end of this incredible journey through the world of the Maya civilization. Today, We explored everything from their powerful kings and sacred pyramids to their daily lives, scientific genius, and the mysteries behind their sudden collapse. We saw how a civilization that thrived for centuries was deeply connected to the cosmos, nature, and the cycles of life, teaching us that human innovation, faith, and resilience can endure even through adversity. The moral of the story? Civilization is not just built in stone and monuments. It lives through knowledge, culture, and the people who carry it forward. The Maya remind us that understanding history helps us appreciate not only the past, but the intricate connection between humans, the environment, and the cosmos. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell here on History Teller YT, so you never miss a story from the annals of time. We'll be back with more extraordinary histories, unraveling the mysteries of civilizations, heroes, and events that shaped the world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep wondering, and let history speak to you. Now please like, share, and subscribe for more amazing history.